Chapter 1019. But now wasn't the time to worry about these things. If he was targeted by an abyssal creature hiding in the dark, would there be a good ending? Thinking of this, Qin Yu's heart tightened and his face darkened. But the following day was calm and tranquil without anything happening at all. Qin Yu couldn't help but wonder if his senses had been wrong. Before night fell, outside a remote courtyard, Qin Yu looked at East Zhou Jolly. The weariness on her face was even heavier, and her eyes were bloodshot. From the looks of it, did she encounter some problem? But she still didn't say anything. After entering the room, she took out a steamed bun and gave it to Qin Yu. You should be hungry again, right? This steamed bun is for you. Her smile was a bit difficult, but she didn't hesitate at all. It was clear she really didn't want Qin Yu to interfere in her matters. Perhaps there was another reason for this. Qin Yu ate the steamed bun, his eyes flashing. He didn't say anything. Night arrived as expected. Darkness covered the city, and everything fell silent, without the least bit of sound coming out. But this night was doomed to not be peaceful. There was a knock on the door in the darkness. Soon there was movement in the courtyard. Uncle Neo stood up and opened the door. He forced a smile. My lord, why have you come again? Didn't I say before that this old man has no problems here? If you continue like this, it will affect my guests. Jolly opened her eyes. Her body moved, and like a soft snake, she drilled into Qin Yu's chest. Thinking from experience, her movements were much faster. She quickly adjusted her angle and completely restrained her aura. But this time, the situation had clearly gone beyond her control. There was a stuffy cough in the courtyard. Although it was very light, Qin Yu could still feel the shock and disbelief contained within. Then, Uncle Neo's voice completely vanished. What followed was a light chewing sound. But in the deathly silence of the night, it was especially clear. Between his nose and mouth, he could faintly smell the thick scent of blood. In his arms, Jolly stiffened. It was clear that even after restraining her aura, she still retained her outstanding perception. In the darkness, a sharp light flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. He looked out the window. Although it was pitch black, he could clearly feel a pair of icy cold eyes locking onto him. As he thought, the tranquility of the day didn't mean anything. That abyssal creature had made its move. The only good news was that it wasn't his true self that came. It seemed that he had many scruples in the dark. But there was another problem. This abyssal creature was actually able to command the night patrols of this city to work for him. Just this point alone, if one thought about it carefully, one's heart would subconsciously turn cold. It was quiet outside the courtyard and inside the house. The air became sticky and cold, as if the whole place was about to freeze. But this peace would eventually be broken. Qin Yu patted East Zhou Jelly, pushed her away from his arms, and got off the bed. The moment his feet touched the ground, the tightly shut door was violently pushed open. The darkness was still darkness, but at this moment, Dongzhou Jelly could clearly sense that in this pure darkness, there was an icy aura that surged towards her and completely drowned her. She was completely frozen. Besides her thoughts, she couldn't even move a finger. Within Qin Yu's soul space, the sun and moon force field spread out, wrapping around him. The cold energy that invaded his body was quickly melted away by his tumbling blood. His body stiffened for a moment before he regained his freedom. Without hesitation, he rushed towards the door. East Zhou Jelly was in the room. He hoped that she would be drawn into the slaughter. Moreover, when enemies met on a narrow road, the courageous would win. The fact that he could resist the invasion of cold energy should have surpassed the city patrol's expectations. He had to seize the opportunity to widen the advantage he had at this moment while the other party was unprepared. The sun and moon force field swept out. Qin Yu closed his eyes, but he was still able to catch a glimpse of that invisible figure hidden in the darkness. Without hesitation, he punched out. The figure on the other side clearly slowed down. The city patrol that was just about to push open the door to enter clearly didn't expect to encounter such a violent counterattack. He lifted a hand and cold energy crazily gathered. But at this time, Qin Yu's fist had already fallen. The moment he touched the cold energy, Qin Yu didn't need to stimulate it at all. Hidden within his body, the strength that belonged to the jade embryo egg seemed to sense the aura of its natural enemy and held outwards. At this moment, a trace of light appeared in the darkness. It was weak, but in the pitch-black darkness, it was enough to illuminate the narrow space between the two people. Qin Yu finally saw the city patrol that was hiding in the darkness. This person had the face of an ordinary and slightly solemn old man. There was still blood at the corners of his mouth that hadn't been wiped clean after he chewed on it. But at this moment, what shocked Qin Yu the most was that this person was the master of this small courtyard, Uncle Niao. Before he could think about what was happening, the cold energy beneath his fist seemed to be exposed to the scorching sun, instantly dissipating. Qin Yu could clearly feel that although the strength of his fist had caused the guard's chest to cave in and many of his ribs to break, it hadn't caused any substantial damage to him. It was as if this degree of injury could be healed with a mere thought by the patrolman who had fused into the darkness and was covered in the power of cold energy. But now, what Qin Yu erupted with wasn't just his own strength, but also the attack of the jade embryo egg. Like a raging tide of lava, it flowed through the wound that Qin Yu had caused, tearing through the guard's body as if it were rotten wood. Wherever it went, it burned away everything, leaving not the least bit of life behind. A pained roar sounded out from the other side. The face that was completely the same as Uncle Niao's twisted in pain. In the next moment, flames appeared, wrapping around his entire body. Then they were extinguished in a breath of time. The one wrapped up in the darkness, the one who had caused East Zhou Jilly to lose all ability to resist just by appearing, the extremely dangerous and terrifying night patrol guard, had already been burnt to ashes. His entire body fell to the ground. He had died, let alone the patrol guard. Even Qin Yu, who had killed him, was left dumbfounded. This was because this process had been far too simple. The other party had pushed open the door, and he had stormed forwards, punched out, and then the battle had ended. Only the heavens knew that when Qin Yu pushed East Zhou Jilly away from his chest and attacked on his own initiative, he had already prepared himself for a bitter battle. Otherwise, why would he have worried that the shock waves of the battle would draw in East Zhou Jilly and harm her? The strength of the jade embryo egg, ever since he had refined it into his body. This was the second time that it had erupted on its own initiative without Qin Yu's control. The first time was when he had killed the abyssal life form, and now was the second time. Basically, Qin Yu could confirm that the night patrol guard that attacked the night patrol guard was acting according to the will of the abyssal life form. And the strength of the jade embryo egg had erupted on its own initiative once more. Moreover, it had caused a terrifying amount of damage to the night patrol guard. Did this mean that the night patrol guard's body had already been mixed with the strength of the abyssal? In other words, this inherited city of the myriad soul, Dao, had already been corroded by the strength of the abyssal. If this was true, then even if he killed the night patrol guard tonight, that would only be the beginning of the horror. Thinking of this, Qin Yu's complexion became increasingly dignified. He looked up at the pitch-black courtyard where he couldn't even see his fingers. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He could feel an endless cold threat. He didn't close the courtyard door. Instead, he took a step back and closed the door. Although the cold feeling was still there, it was as if it had been shielded outside. He immediately felt much more relaxed. He turned and retreated to the bedside. Qin Yu grabbed East Zhou Jilly's hand. As he felt the bone-chilling cold, he frowned. Hesitation flashed in his eyes. Qin Yu turned and climbed onto the bed. He said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." He stretched out his arms and embraced her frozen body. His heart began to beat vigorously in his chest, and his qi and blood surged. releasing warmth and wrapping around her. An hour later, Chinyu heard a long exhale in his ears. "How do you feel?" I'm fine." East Zhou Jilly's voice trembled. She had been corroded by the cold, and her thoughts had become increasingly sluggish. There was nothing she could do about it. She even thought that she would die here and now. Now, as she leaned against Chinyu's chest and felt the warmth released from his body, she actually wanted to cry. After experiencing the torment of life and death, she could clearly feel just how precious life was. "Chinyu, thank you! Thank you for saving me." After a brief silence, Chinyu revealed an apologetic expression. He said in a soft voice, "If I'm not wrong, he came for me. You encountered this matter because of me. I have a premonition that this is only the beginning. Tomorrow, I will find another place to stay. Don't speak anymore and hurry up and recover." Then, everything calmed down. When the dark night retreated, the deathly silent city was once more filled with noise. Chinyu loosened his grip and left the bed. East Zhou Jilly sat up, her complexion still a bit pale. "You're leaving now?" Chinyu didn't explain further. He thought for a moment and said, "The land of inheritance of the myriad soul Tao is filled with unknown dangers. If possible, you should leave as soon as possible." East Zhou Jilly's eyes revealed a struggle, but soon she took a deep breath. "All right, I'll listen to you." The events of these past 2 days had left her exhausted. In addition to the sudden attack from the patrolling guards last night, she finally decided to leave. Although she hadn't obtained the myriad soul great Tao that she wanted the most, entering the myriad soul Tao this time could still be considered a great harvest. One had to understand how to be content with what they had. Those who were insatiably greedy often had a bad ending. Chinyu nodded. Just as he was about to push open the door and leave, he frowned. Surprise flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, the voices of several people came from outside the courtyard. "East Zhou Jilly lives here?" a woman asked. Another person said, "That's right, I saw her go in with my own eyes." "Why is the door open? Go in and see if she's still here." On the bed, East Zhou Jilly's complexion changed. She glanced at Chinyu, a nervous expression on her face. "My friend is here. You absolutely cannot come out." She got off the bed, straightened her clothes, pushed open the door, and walked out. "Miss Yin, fellow Taoists, why have you come looking for me so early in the morning?" East Zhou Jilly's eyes swept around. Behind them were 2 black-robed figures. She frowned. Cloud Phoenix revealed a relaxed expression. She smiled and said, "Miss East Zhou, our time is precious, so let's not waste time. The reason I came here today is because of yesterday's matter. I wonder if Miss East Zhou has considered it?" East Zhou Jilly's frown deepened. "I already replied to you yesterday. I will not trade silver money." Cloud Phoenix lightly said, "Miss East Zhou, we can be considered friends. I hope you can consider this carefully and don't make things difficult for us." "Miss Yin, I am not making things difficult for you, but I do not wish to speak further. If there is nothing else, then please leave." East Zhou Jilly revealed an angry expression. Chapter 1020. You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Eastern Zhou Chali, since we are here, you have no right to refuse. Another cultivator had an unfriendly expression. "Hand over the silver money, and our previous agreement remains unchanged. Otherwise, Miss Eastern Zhou, don't regret it." Eastern Zhou Chali, a wise man is a wise man. Don't make a mistake. The faces of the people opposite her turned cold. Eastern Zhou Chali said coldly, "If I don't agree, will you try to rob me? Don't forget what this place is." He would feel hungry and would have to eat. At night, he would have to find a place to stay away from the darkness. But the cultivators who entered the city still had their own strength. Once there was a conflict, it would definitely affect the surrounding area. And in this city, once the original residents were affected, they would be suppressed by the city guards. Because of this, the city was still quiet after a few days. There were no fights or killings between foreign cultivators. Yunfeng glanced at her with a trace of pity in her indifferent eyes, as if pitying her ignorance. Turning around, she saw two figures hidden under black robes. She could only tell that they were a man and a woman. She bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Sirs, East Joe Charlie isn't willing to cooperate. I'll have to trouble you." There was a moment of silence under the black robes. Then the man said in a low voice, "Okay." He raised his hand, and two figures flashed out. Judging from their clothes, they were the guards who maintained order in the city during the day. "I have some private matters to deal with. Please ask the surrounding residents to leave for now." The two guards cupped their hands and left in different directions. They knocked on the courtyard doors along the street and took the people away. Hearing the movements around her, Eastern Zhou Charlie's face paled. She looked at the two black-robed people in shock. They could actually control the guards in the city. Although it was not the first time Yunfeng had seen this, she was still shocked. She didn't know who these two lords were, but they had promised that as long as they collected enough silver, they would repay them. Yunfeng didn't doubt this at all. Her tone became even more respectful. "I'm sorry to trouble you two lords." She turned to look at Eastern Zhou Charlie. Her eyes were filled with pity and mockery. How could a woman from a remote place know the true secrets of this world? Before the myriad soul path opened, they had already locked onto the inheritance that they were about to obtain. But the premise of all this was that they had to satisfy the two lords first. So they had to get the money from Dongzhou Jelly. "Miss Eastern Zhou, hand over the money. I will save your last bit of face." East Zhou Charlie's face turned even paler. At this moment, the woman in the black robe suddenly said, "There's another person in the room." Yunfeng's eyes were sharp. "Who's inside? Come out." Dongzhou Jelly raised her head abruptly. "I will give you all the money. Please leave immediately." Hee. Looks like Miss Eastern Zhou is very concerned about the people in the room. "I'll have to take a look then. Come out, or we'll have to personally invite you out." With a creaking sound, the door was pushed open from the inside. Qin Yu stepped out, his eyes sweeping over the other side. When his gaze fell on the two black-robed men, his eyes flickered and a dark, golden light flashed. "It's you!" As they exclaimed, the faces of the people on the other side revealed expressions of shock. On that day, East Joe Jelly had invited Qin Yu to dine with them. Although they hadn't interacted much, it had only been several days, so they still clearly remembered each other. Yunfeng's eyes flashed. "It seems that we have some fate with this fellow Taoist. Miss Eastern Zhou, won't you introduce us?" The first time they met, she had felt something unusual about Qin Yu. Now that they met again, that feeling was even more intense. In addition to how East Zhou Jelly had protected him, Yunfeng narrowed her eyes. Seemed like there was something wrong with this person. Just as East Zhou Jelly was about to say something, she was interrupted by Qin Yu. He stood in front of her and said, "My name is Qin Yu. I am Miss Eastern Zhou's friend." "Friend? Haha, a single man and a single woman sleeping in the same room at night and sleeping in the same bed. That must be very good friends." A cultivator clenched his teeth, a cold light surging in his eyes. It couldn't be denied that East Zhou Jelly was an extremely beautiful woman. Although he looked down on her background, Jiang Yuanyi was still interested in her as a person. But unfortunately, East Zhou Jelly didn't respond to his subtle hints at all. Jiang Yuanyi was secretly annoyed by this. Now that he saw Qin Yu come out from her room, the evil fire in his heart began to burn even brighter. "You ignore me and keep this pretty boy in your room. East Zhou Jelly, you are really good." Taking a deep breath, Jiang Yuanyi was about to speak again when Qin Yu's eyes fell on him. Although Qin Yu's eyes were calm and without much fluctuation, he didn't know why, but his heart chilled and the vulgar words he was about to say were forcefully swallowed back down. Qin Yu glanced at Jiang Yuanyi and then didn't bother with him. His eyes passed over the aggressive woman, Yunfeng, and fell onto the two black-robed people behind them. The corners of his lips curled up in a mocking smile, a bit of coldness in his eyes. You too, for better or worse. You and I can be considered old friends. Do you plan on continuing to remain silent? After regaining his composure, the secretly annoyed Jiang Yuanyi, as well as the indifferent Yunfeng and the others, all of their complexions changed. Hearing these words, Qin Yu actually recognized the two lords beneath the black robes. Although they didn't know if this was true or false, they still chose to shut up. There was silence in the air. Qin Yu's lips curved up even more. What? You two hope that I will personally pull off your black robes and then recognize you? Or... He swept his eyes over the people in front of him, his eyes filled with disdain. Do you think these people can stop me? Yunfeng and the others held their breaths. Even if they guessed that Qin Yu might be acquainted with the two black-robed lords, hearing these words still made Yunfeng and the others angry. They thought, how arrogant are you? How preposterous! Each of them had a great background. When it came to nobility, they were far above East Zhou Jili. Because of this, when they stole her money, they weren't worried that it would bring trouble to themselves. These people were tyrannical to begin with. In addition to their various hidden cards, if they joined hands to fight, even an original God Realm expert wouldn't be afraid. However, as time passed in silence, the annoyance in Yunfeng and the others' eyes gradually disappeared, replaced by restlessness because under the black robes, the two lords were silent. It was like they tacitly agreed with Qin Yu's words. In other words, in the eyes of the two black-robed lords, even if they joined hands, they might not be Qin Yu's match. How was this possible? Yunfeng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others looked at Qin Yu with awe in their eyes. In this world, only the strong couldn't be offended. Finally, a voice sounded out from under the black robes. Qin Yu, you are strong, but so what if you can defeat them? What we control now is a strength that you can't even imagine. As the voice fell, the two city guards walked over. Their icy cold eyes locked onto Qin Yu, revealing a threatening expression. Anyone that dares to offend the Lord will be severely punished. With a loud shout, the auras of the two guards erupted. They weren't too strong, at least they weren't. But the auras of these two people seemed to be one with the entire city. Once they clashed with them, what awaited them would be the suppression of the entire city. Qin Yu was expressionless. With a thought, the sun and moon force field erupted, wrapping around him and the two city guards. In the next moment, the aura of the jade embryo egg's strength broke out from his body. The complexions of the two city guards changed. Their icy cold eyes revealed fear. At this moment, they could feel the threat of death coming from Qin Yu. Not just that, but they also had an impulse to kneel on the ground and beg for forgiveness, as if the one they had offended was a truly great person. Shua, the sun and moon force field was retracted and the aura of the jade embryo egg vanished with it. The entire process lasted for less than a breath of time. To the outside, it seemed as if Qin Yu had looked up and glanced at the two city guards. It was just that simple. However, it was this gaze that caused the expressions of the two city guards to change greatly. Their faces were filled with unconcealable fear and even a trace of reverence. Today is a private matter between me and them. I hope that you will not interfere. Qin Yu lightly said. Without hesitation, the two city guards bowed. Yes, thank you for forgiving the two of us. Farewell. After speaking, the two respectfully bowed and left without looking back. From beneath the black robes, a man's angry roar echoed out. But this didn't cause the two guards to stop. Instead, their footsteps quickened. This scene caused the air to fall deathly silent. Everyone's eyes widened. As they looked at Qin Yu, a deep awe appeared in their eyes. How did he do this? East Zhou Jolly thought to herself. Was this the true strength of a ruler's disciple? Gulp. Jiang Yuanyi swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He suddenly felt that swallowing the words that had been on the tip of his tongue had been the right decision. Qin Yu had a calm expression. He lightly said, "I think we can have a good talk now." This time, no one doubted that Qin Yu had the qualifications to direct matters. Silence reigned. Cough. There was a light cough from beneath the black robes. Then a deep and low voice sounded out. "Qin Yu, there is no grudge between us to begin with. From now on, well water does not interfere with river water. We bid our farewells here." As he spoke, he turned to leave. Yun Feng and the others were stunned, they thought. Were these two lords going to admit defeat? Just who was this Qin Yu? He was actually so terrifying. Hold on. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes, a trace of impatience in his voice. "I don't think you heard what I said. Did I say you could leave?" There was another awkward silence, one filled with an awkwardness. It was impossible to see the expressions of the two people beneath the black robes, but from their stiff bodies and the slight trembling of their clothes, it seemed that they weren't in a good state. "What do you want?" The woman beneath the black robes spoke for the first time. Qin Yu said, "East Zhou Jolly is my friend. You have affected her mood today, so you must compensate her. For instance, some silver would be a good choice." "Of course. Don't worry, this is only the first point. In addition, I hope that we can find a quiet place to talk because there are some things that I hope I can obtain your answers to." "Qin Yu." The woman's voice was filled with anger. "Don't go too far. Qin Yu said you can refuse." Fine, refuse? Although she really wanted to refuse. She knew that if she did, the consequences wouldn't be too wonderful. Just how did this Qin Yu accomplish this? He was actually able to intimidate all living beings in this city. If he didn't do this, how could they be controlled? All right, I am also a bit curious about fellow Taoist Qin Yu. The black-robed man agreed to everything. East Zhou Jolly received 10 silver coins from Yun Feng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others. Although their complexions were ugly, they didn't dare to disobey the orders of the two black-robed men. This was because they weren't Qin Yu. "Miss East Zhou, remember what I just said to you. Let's go," Qin Yu said in a soft voice. East Zhou Jolly bit her lips. She deeply looked at him and said, "Be careful." She turned and left, soon vanishing into the stream of people. Now that Qin Yu had said that this city was dangerous, she was even more convinced. But even Qin Yu had been attacked. It seemed that even though he was strong and possessed inconceivable and mysterious abilities, he still couldn't sit back and relax here. She hoped that he would be careful and nothing would happen to him. Chapter 10:21. Qin Yu didn't know that he had harvested the blessings of East Zhou Jolly from the bottom of his heart. He looked away and said, "You too, although this courtyard is very quiet right now, I think it's best if we change places as soon as possible. Otherwise, if we provoke some other trouble, don't blame me for not warning you." Last night's patrol guard had been killed, and the abyssal life forms must have sensed it. It was highly likely that they would come to investigate today. Although they didn't know what Qin Yu meant by his words, the complexions of the two black-robed people changed. Through some hidden connection with the city beneath their feet, they both felt their hearts turn cold. The black-robed man looked deeply at Qin Yu and said, "If that's the case, then I ask fellow Taoist Qin Yu to come with us." The group quickly left. After a moment, they entered another courtyard. Whether it was the scale of the buildings or the living environment, it was far, far better than Qin Yu and East Zhou Jolly's residence. The black-robed man waved his hand. Yun Feng and the others respectfully bowed and stayed outside. But looking at their eyes, it was clear they were curious as to what the two sides would say next. They entered the hall and sat down. As the two black-robed people looked at him, Qin Yu lightly said, "I think fellow Taoist Xiachun and Taiping should be curious as to how I determined your identities." The two people across from him shook. They pulled down their black robes. They were the two people Qin Yu was talking about. "Indeed, our auras have been completely isolated. With fellow Taoist Qin Yu's cultivation, he shouldn't have been able to see through us. Qin Yu said, one's cultivation cannot be simply limited. For instance, fellow Taoist Qin Yu, in terms of cultivation, you can only be considered ordinary in this city. Compared to those outside the courtyard, there is a considerable disparity. But you too are able to order them around, and even cause them to revere you, isn't that right? Xia Chun smiled. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu is right. He paused for a moment, a sharp light flashing in his eyes. But now let's get down to business. I wonder what fellow Taoist Qin Yu would like to ask. Qin Yu said, there are many things. For instance, fellow Taoists, why did you appear here? I apologize. Perhaps my question is a bit too direct. But with your strength, you shouldn't be able to pass the test of the 3 mountains. What fellow Taoist Qin Yu says is correct. In terms of strength, we are indeed inferior to fellow Taoist, but passing the test of the 3 mountains involves some secrets, so it's not convenient for me to tell you the truth. Xia Chun awkwardly said. Qin Yu nodded. I understand. Then let me change the question. Fellow Taoists, why did you bring people here to steal the silver? This matter is not very convenient. No problem. Qin Yu lifted a finger. I've always been a very easy person to talk to. Then, let's change to the 3rd question. How do you control the city guards? Before Xia Chun opened his mouth, he smiled and said, just because I'm easy to talk to doesn't mean I won't get angry. As the saying goes, you can't do it more than 3 times. If you still use the excuse that it's not easy to talk to me or that it involves secrets, you'll all lose face. Taoist priestess Taiping lowered her voice. Qin Yu, we aren't lying to you. Regarding these matters, we have all sworn a blood oath that if we dare to reveal even the slightest bit of it, we will die without a grave. Forcing us to speak is the same as forcing us to die. Qin Yu remained expressionless, unmoved in the least. You made a bloodline oath and didn't dare to speak. But aren't you afraid that I will kill you? Or do you think that I can't kill you, or that I don't dare to kill you? The temperature in the air suddenly fell. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping's complexions changed. If they could express their emotions, they would definitely be roaring out loud. Qin Yu, don't go too far. But Qin Yu was bullying them, and he didn't leave them any leeway. He was clearly using his strength to suppress them. If they didn't tell him the answer, then he would teach them a lesson. The 2 people across from him had gloomy and uncertain expressions. Fear and anger weaved in their eyes. If it weren't for them fearing Qin Yu's cultivation, they would have already attacked him. But before this, the scene of Qin Yu rushing through the test of the 3 mountains had left a tremendous impact on them. Because they had rushed in, they were even more aware of just how terrifying the test of the 3 mountains was. It had to be known that even though the 2 of them had used a secret technique and joined forces, they still felt it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. And Qin Yu was just one person. Qin Yu saw their expressions from the corner of his eyes. He suddenly lifted a hand and pointed a finger forward. Ripples spread out, covering them within. Don't be nervous. This is just a minor technique. It can isolate us from the outside world. What you say here might not trigger the bloodline oath you made. Taoist priestess Taiping coldly sneered. She thought that Qin Yu was underestimating the power of the oath they made. But soon her complexion changed. The chair was still the same chair. Its position hadn't changed at all. She could even see through the invisible fluctuations and see what was happening outside. But because of the existence of these fluctuations, her sense was completely compressed and confined to a narrow range. They no longer had any perception of the outside world. In fact, their connection with the city had disappeared. How was this possible? If they hadn't experienced it themselves, they wouldn't have dared to believe it. But Qin Yu had done it, and he had done it with incomparable ease. He had only lifted a hand and gently pointed forward. Then invisible fluctuations covered them, isolating them from the outside world. How is this possible? Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping groaned inwardly. As they looked at Qinyu, they couldn't help but reveal even more fear and awe. The unknown often meant terror, and in their eyes, Qinyu was an existence covered in a dense fog. Couldn't kill them, or didn't dare to kill them. Of course, that didn't exist. With Qinyu's current methods, he could quietly kill them without causing any trouble for himself. If they could think of this, then Qinyu was even more aware of it. The strength he revealed at this moment should be the final warning. If they spoke, then perhaps they would be fine. But if they didn't speak, then all that awaited them was death. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping glanced at each other. They could see the fear in each other's hearts, as well as the bitterness and helplessness. Facing such a Qinyu, they simply didn't have the ability to struggle or resist. Taking a deep breath, Xia Chun said, "We can answer your questions, but you must swear that you won't tell anyone. Otherwise, even if you kill us, we won't say half a word." Qinyu nodded. "I agree. Please, if you agree so casually, we won't have any confidence. Moreover, you haven't even sworn an oath." But looking at Qinyu's calm expression, whether it was Xia Chun or Taoist priestess Taiping, neither of them had any thoughts of making him swear an oath. They were afraid that he would fall out with them. Anyway, as long as Qinyu had a brain, he wouldn't casually spread this matter. Otherwise, no matter how powerful his background was, he would still be in big trouble. Xia Chun glanced at Taoist priestess Taiping and took a deep breath. "I'll speak first." From this glance, Qinyu read the word true love. He didn't see that there were sparks between the two of them. The first person to speak was obviously going to test whether Qinyu's isolation from the outside world really worked. Taoist priestess Taiping. Just from her name, one could tell that she wasn't very emotional. But Xia Chun's taste was very light, which matched his name quite well. Some messy thoughts flashed through Qinyu's mind, but he instantly restrained himself. He stretched out his hand and said, "Please." Xia Chun said, "Let's answer the first question first. Taiping and I are indeed not strong enough to pass the test of the 3 mountains, but we have a secret method. When we join forces, we can offset most of the power of the first and second mountains, so we can endure it. We can't tell you about this secret method, but we can let you know that the reason we can grasp this secret method is because our ancestors contributed to the construction of the myriad soul path." He clenched his teeth as he spoke, a trace of nervousness on his face. Taiping subconsciously tightened her grip on his hand, but nothing terrifying happened. Whether it was this space or the outside world, they both remained calm and unperturbed. "Who?" Xia Chun let out a deep breath and patted Taoist priestess Taiping's hand. It was clear that Qinyu was right. His method could really isolate the connection between them and the outside world, and even block out the bloodline oath. Qinyu's strength was simply terrifying. "You mean to say that when your ancestors built the Myriad Soul Road, they left behind some unknown method that allowed you to come here, and it is also because of this that you are able to control the city guards?" Qinyu asked with a frown. "That's right." Xia Chun nodded. "Of course, what you say isn't completely correct. Although our ancestors left behind some method, it absolutely isn't that formidable. Otherwise, after all these years, the opening of the Myriad Soul Path and the actions of our 2 races would have long since been known by others. Over the countless years, with the efforts of dozens of generations, including me and Taiping, we have only managed to activate the method our ancestors left behind twice." A sharp light flashed in Qinyu's eyes. "The reason you are collecting silver coins should be to obtain something from the Myriad Soul Path, right?" Taoist priestess Taiping said, "That's right." She glanced at Xia Chun. "Since we can't hide it from fellow Taoist Qinyu, how about we speak frankly? Perhaps there might be a chance for us to cooperate." Xia Chun's eyes brightened. "Cooperate?" He looked at Qinyu, a flash of hesitation in his eyes that soon turned to firm determination. "Fellow Taoist Qinyu, you are indeed strong, but if it weren't for me and Taiping, you would never have been able to come into contact with this city's greatest hidden treasure. Now, as long as you are willing, we can join forces and obtain an unimaginable good fortune." Taoist Taiping said, "That's right. I believe, fellow Taoist Qinyu, since you can deter the living beings in the city, perhaps you can even give us additional help in this matter." Qinyu frowned, interrupting the two of them. "Let me make things clear first. I haven't agreed to cooperate with you yet." Xia Chun stood up. He lifted a foot and stepped on the ground. "Fellow Taoist Qinyu, do you know the origin of this city we are in right now?" He sucked in a deep breath and subconsciously lowered his voice. "There is a peerless evil devil suppressed beneath this city. It is because the Grand Array formation is constantly drawing out this evil devil's source strength that the illusory realm is turned into reality. This city and all the living beings within this city, all of them are part of the illusory realm. Of course, calling it an illusion isn't the right way to put it, because right now, this city truly exists. What we need to do is open a channel and directly draw out this city's source strength. If we succeed, both you and I will obtain an inconceivable good fortune. Compared to this, the so-called inheritance of the myriad soul path is nothing at all. That's because the 10,000 soul Tao is a kind of inheritance that has evolved from this source." Qin Yu was expressionless. Although his heart was shaken, he certainly wouldn't completely believe Xia Chun's words. But when he heard Xia Chun say that there was a peerless evil demon suppressed beneath the city, his heart began to race. Then, an instinctive thought appeared in his mind. The evil demon Xia Chun spoke of was an incomparably terrifying abyssal life form. If this was true, then the abyssal life form he killed before, as well as the abyssal life form that infiltrated this city, could be explained. There must be a problem with the abyssal life form that was suppressed here, causing the abyssal strength to leak out and corrode the city. Thus, the night guard last night had been controlled by the abyssal life form. If this was true, then, if he could obtain the source strength that Xia Chun spoke of, then he might be able to truly control the foundation of the myriad soul path. At that time, he would naturally be able to think of a way to unravel it. Sparks exploded in the depths of Qin Yu's eyes. He locked his eyes on the two and slowly said, "Why should I believe you too?" Taoist priestess Taiping flipped her hand and a green branch appeared in her palm. On this branch hung 3 bright red fruits. This fruit is called the heartlink fruit. After dripping a drop of blood on it and eating it, the 3 fruits will be connected for a month. It will be impossible for them to have any thoughts of harming one another. Otherwise, they will suffer a backlash. If fellow Taoist Qinyu doesn't feel assured, then the 3 of us can each eat one and feel assured to tell the truth. Xia Chun and I are even more worried about fellow Taoist Qinyu. After all, with your strength, if you were to ruthlessly turn against us after you succeed, we wouldn't be able to resist at all." This was the first time he had even heard of the heartlink fruit, so it was naturally impossible for him to have seen it before. But at this time, the stone pagoda's thoughts fluctuated in Qin Yu's mind. The fruits are real. Agree to them. This fellow had actually broken through Qin Yu's blockade once more. He was truly indomitable. Okay. Qin Yu nodded. The 3 of them each took a fruit. After dripping a drop of blood on it, a red light flashed on the surface of the fruit, and it immediately became an even darker red. Qin Yu opened his mouth and swallowed it. A warm current flowed into his soul. He immediately discovered that a marvelous connection had formed between him, Xia Chun, and Taoist priestess Taiping. Although they couldn't truly feel each other's thoughts, they could at least roughly judge where each other's thoughts were. Moreover, there was a faint and powerful imprisonment that wrapped around the 3 of them, making it impossible for them to harm each other. This was the backlash that Taoist priestess Taiping spoke of. All right, now, fellow Taoist Qinyu, and we are truly on the same side. Taoist priestess Taiping smiled. Her expression relaxed, and her smile was even more beautiful. If it weren't for her chest being too disappointing, she would have been a great beauty. Xia Chun said, "Fellow Taoist Qinyu, since we are cooperating, we must be open and honest with each other. So, I ask that fellow Taoist tell us why you are able to deter the living beings in the city. You must know that they are all born from Source, and in this city, they can be called invincible existences. With our cultivations, it is impossible for us to suppress them." Qin Yu was silent for a moment. Then he slowly said, "In the early years, I once had a lucky chance and obtained a marvelous thing. This thing just happens to be able to restrain the strength of the city guards. So this is why they maintain their awe towards me." Restrain the city guards? Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping's complexions changed. Through the heart-link fruit, they were able to determine that Qin Yu wasn't lying. But these city guards were all evolved from Source. If Qin Yu could restrain them, didn't that mean that he possessed the strength to suppress the source of this city? This person was far too terrifying. Chapter 10:22. Compared to when they first entered the hall, the atmosphere when Qin Yu and the others walked out was completely different. There was no more tension or depression. Yunfeng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others all relaxed. Otherwise, if there really was a conflict and they were all caught up in it, it would be hard to predict what their fate would be. "Greetings, lords." Yunfeng respectfully bowed. Her eyes fell on Qin Yu, and she hesitated, not knowing what to say. Fortunately, her hesitation didn't last too long. Xia Chun's voice sounded from beneath the black robe. "Lord Qin Yu will join forces with us to open the hidden treasure in the city. When you face him, you must be as respectful as you are to us." Yunfeng's heart chilled. She hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Lord Qin Yu. I didn't know your identity before, so I ask that you be magnanimous and don't lower yourself to our level." She had no choice but to lower her head. It had to be known that just now, the mysterious and powerful black-robed existence had addressed him as Lord with a respectful tone. In addition to what she had seen with her own eyes, it was clear that Lord Qin Yu's status was above the two black-robed existences. Such an existence had to be as respectful as possible. If she didn't take this chance to beg for mercy, would she just wait to be taught a lesson? It was natural for the juniors of large families to be proud. After all, their powerful and noble backgrounds were branded on their bodies from birth. But in the face of a more powerful existence, they wouldn't hesitate to lower their heads to avoid greater harm. This was also the education they had received since childhood. It influenced their minds and made them more straightforward and pragmatic. They wouldn't care too much about things like face. After all, face couldn't be eaten, and it couldn't be used to protect one's life. "Please forgive us, Lord Qin Yu." Jiang Yuanyi and the others bowed, their expressions respectful, but also a bit nervous. From the matter of compensating Dongzhou Chali, it wasn't difficult to see that Qin Yu's methods were very down to earth. Now, should they take the initiative to offer something to express their apologies? It had to be known that sometimes the difference between being active and being passive was huge. But their worries didn't come true. Qin Yu thought about the abyssal creature hiding in the city, and most likely preparing to cut him into pieces. How could he have the mood to extort these people? Of course, this didn't mean that extortion wasn't important. As a way to obtain a shocking amount of rewards, when the situation permitted it, he should still make good use of it. But now that time was tight, he could only look at the big picture first. Qin Yu nodded to Yunfeng and the others, not saying much. He turned and glanced at Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping beneath the black robes. The two of them immediately understood his thoughts. "Start immediately. No matter what method you use, you must collect 100 silver coins before noon today. Of course, to ensure your success, I will summon the city guards to help you." Xia Chun took a deep breath, and a serious look appeared in his eyes. "But remember, it must be done before noon. If you are late, the promise I gave you before will automatically become invalid. Yun Feng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others respectfully responded. However, after they left the hospital, they all had bitter expressions on their faces. Those who were qualified to receive money were definitely not easy to deal with. East Zhou's Charlie came from a poor background, so they could not care less. However, not all the others were in the same situation. There were some powerful figures that even they were afraid of. Although it wouldn't be a problem for them to steal the money with the help of the city guards, they would still be in trouble if they really did so. Even if there weren't any problems now, once they left the myriad soul Tao and returned to the outside world, trouble would still come. But the problem was, did they really have to give up just because of these troubles? Did they have to give up on the promise that Lord Black-Robed had given them? Of course not. Yun Feng took a deep breath. She coldly said, "No matter what, we must obtain enough money. This is not just for ourselves, but also for the mission that our family has entrusted to us. If we seize the money, we will be in trouble, but the outcome is unknown. But if we ruin the plans of the three lords, even if we can leave here alive, our family will not let us off." Everyone's hearts chilled. The hesitation and helplessness in their eyes immediately receded like a tide, replaced with firm determination once more. "Fellow Taoists can die, but not me, everyone. I can only apologize." Shwa, shwa. Several people split up. Each person was followed by 2 city guards, all of them rushing off in different directions. Before noon, 100 silver coins were placed in front of them. It was unknown what Yun Feng and the others had experienced, but their complexions were clearly ugly. But at this time, no one cared about their complexions. Beneath the black robes, Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping both revealed happy expressions. They stood up and said, "Fellow Taoist Qinyu, let's go." Although they didn't know why Qinyu had requested that they complete the extraction of the source energy today. But through his various actions, and after both sides had taken the heart-linking fruit, Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping naturally chose to believe in his judgment. Even though doing this would definitely bring about some trouble, they had already noticed that something had changed in the city. The contingency plan that their ancestors had painstakingly arranged in the past might not have the qualifications to be used again after today. They might as well take advantage of this chance to ruthlessly destroy him. Qinyu stood up. "Please lead the way." He also wanted to know where the key point of the city that these 2 people spoke of was. The group left and hurried towards a certain place in the city. This was a small city that was several miles wide. Even if they gave up flying, with the speed of a cultivator, they would soon arrive at their final destination. According to Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping, in order to extract the source energy of the evil demon suppressed beneath the city, they needed to find a weak point in the array formation seal and then open the channel left behind by their ancestors. "We've arrived. The channel left behind by our ancestors is inside," Xia Chun said in a low voice. Qinyu looked at the familiar private school in front of him, and a strange expression appeared on his face. His previous intuition had been correct. At this time, his complexion changed. He turned and looked behind him. In a quiet alley, there was the sound of calm footsteps. Shang Lingyue was walking over. His expression was calm, and there was a warm smile on his lips. His eyes swept over the several people, and then fell on Qinyu. "Fellow Taoist Qinyu, we meet again." Qinyu's heart tightened. He thought to himself that this was indeed the case. This terrifying abyssal creature had been paying attention to this private school all this time. Could it be that he also knew that there was a hidden channel here that could extract the city's source energy? No, if his guess was right, then what was suppressed here by the array formation was an incomparably powerful abyssal creature. If so, then his goal shouldn't be so simple. His thoughts raced. Qinyu smiled and nodded. "Fellow Taoist Shang, it seems there is some fate between the 2 of us." Shang Lingyue's smile widened. "Fate? I like fellow Taoist Qinyu's description. I have a request today, and I hope that fellow Taoist Qinyu can agree to it based on the fate between us. I will be eternally grateful." Qinyu said, "Oh, If I don't find it difficult, then I definitely won't refuse. Shang Lingyue glanced at him. I would like to ask fellow Taoist Qinyu to stay as far away from this private school as possible. Of course, I will compensate you. For instance, as long as you agree, then before you leave Myriad Soul Tao, I guarantee that we will never meet again. How about it? Qin Yu's eyes flashed. In truth, this agreement had exceeded his expectations. It even promised to let him live. But could the words of an abyssal creature be trusted? Well, perhaps it really was possible, but Qin Yu didn't dare to take the risk. Thus he refused. I apologize. These fellow Taoists and I are very interested in this private school in front of us. I have already agreed to advance and retreat together with you fellow Taoists. If I were to retreat now, that would be breaking my promise to all of you. This is clearly wrong. Shang Lingyue's smile didn't diminish. His eyes swept over everyone. When his eyes fell on Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping, he paused for a moment. Fellow Taoist Qinyu, do you really not want to consider my proposal? I'm really sincere. Although they didn't know what sort of riddle Shang Lingyue and Qin Yu were playing, as long as they weren't blind, they could see that the two sides didn't like each other. But what left everyone startled was that Qin Yu, who had been acting tough in front of them, was clearly on the defensive when facing Shang Lingyue. Even when he rejected his proposal, he found a gentle reason. In other words, Qin Yu dreaded this person in front of him. Xia Chun, Taoist priestess Taiping, and the others felt their hearts shake. They thought that the opening of Myriad Soul Tao this time was truly extraordinary. Far too many powerful characters had entered. Qin Yu shook his head. Fellow Taoist Shang, I will have to disappoint you. He revealed an apologetic expression, and his expression was flawless. But all of his thoughts were locked onto Shang Lingyue. As long as Shang Lingyue made any inappropriate movements, Qin Yu could immediately erupt with his greatest strength. If it were just a single person facing this abyssal creature, Qin Yu certainly wouldn't dare to directly reject his proposal. But now, it wasn't just Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping. There was also Yin Feng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others following them. It could be said that Qin Yu was at his strongest right now. Taking a step back, even if he truly angered this abyssal creature, he still had the strength to fight. Moreover, it was daytime right now. In the sneak attack last night, the abyssal creature had only controlled a single night patrol to attack. From this, it could be seen that even if this city was corroded by the abyssal strength, Shang Lingyue still didn't have any scruples. These were the reasons why Qin Yu dared to refuse him. The smile on Shang Lingyue's face faded. When he wasn't smiling, the gentle aura that he deliberately created around him completely vanished. Instead, what replaced it was a cold and gloomy aura that left one's heart cold. It was like a terrifying predator hiding in the dark of night had locked onto him. The predator was baring its sharp white fangs, looking for a suitable opportunity to deliver a fatal strike. Xia Chun, Taoist priestess Taiping, and the others felt their hearts skip a beat, as they thought if someone could faintly suppress Qin Yu, it was impossible for them to be as ordinary as they appeared on the surface. If that's the case, then I won't disturb you any longer. I hope that everyone will have good luck and have some harvests. After he finished speaking, Shang Lingyue turned and walked away. But as he left, the chill that covered everyone's hearts didn't dissipate. Instead, it became even thicker. Xia Chun lowered his voice. Fellow Taoist Qinyu, who is this person? Qin Yu let out a deep breath. A terrifying enemy. And if my speculations aren't wrong, he seems to have locked onto this private school. Although he didn't say it clearly, Xia Chun certainly understood the hidden meaning in his words. Shang Lingyue knew of the existence of the city source. Impossible, he subconsciously wanted to say this, but he forcefully suppressed it. After all, when their ancestors built the Myriad Soul Tao Road in the past, they had left behind some contingencies. There was a chance that other unknown accidents might occur. Is he strong? Taoist priestess Taiping asked. Qin nodded, not saying anything more. Let's go in. The abyssal creature's performance just now had already proven just how important this private school was. Although he hadn't done anything yet, that didn't mean he wouldn't in the future. Time was pressing. No matter why this abyssal creature had been patiently waiting, Qin had to make full use of this precious time. Otherwise, if both sides really did tear apart all pretense of cordiality, then in this city that had likely already been corroded by the abyssal strength, Qin still didn't have full confidence he could face this terrifying abyssal creature. And just like the first few times, the private school didn't close its doors. With the sounds of children reading, a group of people filed in. It's you again? A voice filled with suppressed anger sounded out in everyone's ears. A blue-robed teacher with a light expression walked over with a frown. He swept his eyes over everyone and then directly looked at Qin. I should have said it clearly before. Even if you have, giving you a book is already the limit of the private school. Don't push your luck. Shwa. Everyone's eyes fell on Qin. They thought that this was a fierce character, worthy of being a fierce character. No matter where he was the key. Before, when Shang Lingyu arrived, he had also directly spoken to Qin, not placing them in his eyes at all. Now this teacher was the same. Moreover, what shocked them even more was that Qin had actually succeeded in taking away a book from this private school. It had to be known that after entering the city, they had searched everywhere in search of places that might contain powerful inheritances. This private school that was impervious to all else had also been one of the places they had focused their attention on. In the information they obtained, no one had obtained any harvests from the private school. Being surrounded by shocked and admiring gazes, although he appeared indifferent on the surface, he was actually feeling extremely sour in his heart. Unfortunately, Qin wasn't in the mood to feel any of this right now. He lightly coughed and said, Mister, why must you keep us 1,000 miles away? Moreover, we didn't come here for any other reason. We only thought that the private school's architecture was wonderful and wanted to take a good look around. Of course, if Mister is willing to explain a thing or two to us, that would be even better. Hee. It seemed that lying through one's teeth was an essential skill for all great figures. In addition, one's skin had to be thick and one's mental fortitude had to be good. Otherwise, how could one be able to remain calm in the face of other people's "I don't believe you" gazes? For instance, the teacher who was looking at them with such a gaze, as well as the earnest and calm Lord Qin. The teacher coldly said, If you want to waste time, then I won't stop you. If you want to take a look, then go. But if you affect my teaching, then don't blame me for driving you out. After speaking, he flicked his sleeves and left. In truth, to a certain degree, this was already preferential treatment. If it were any other cultivator, they wouldn't have given them a chance to spout nonsense and would have directly driven them out. Would they even dare to attack them? Of course, even if this was preferential treatment, it was just as the teacher said. In his opinion, Qin and the others were wasting their time. And at this time, he wasn't the only one thinking this. For instance, after failing to threaten Qin, Shang Lingyue found a tea house not too far away and was quietly drinking tea. This tea house was just outside the alley. From its position, not only could one see the exit of the private school, but most of the private school could be seen. According to the original plan, he should have obtained the item and completed the clan's mission. But there were clearly some problems. The person who built this city in the past had truly brilliant methods. He had no idea what they did. But even though the strength of the abyss had clearly seeped into the city, it still wasn't able to completely control it. Otherwise, why would he be waiting here and wasting his time? However, Shang Lingyue could already sense the fluctuations of the abyss's strength. It would soon be able to repair the accident, and at that time he would naturally be able to obtain that item. Drinking a mouthful of tea and placing the teacup on the table, Shang Lingyue narrowed his eyes and sneered. He could feel the auras hidden beneath the black robes of Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping. Without a doubt, they should be the descendants of those two stupid human cultivators. Of course, to say that they were stupid wasn't too good. This was because, to be more accurate, the entire abyssal races should be thanking them for their actions in the past. Even if all of this was done under the guidance of the abyss, slowly luring them in before finally completing the arrangements. If it weren't for this, how could their lord have been suppressed here and slowly restored his consciousness, even allowing his own strength to seep out? You want to extract the source? Haha, what a bunch of laughable ants. If it weren't for the Lord raising you and keeping the channel open for him, there would have been no need for you to exist. Now, the Lord's consciousness was seizing control of the city and had temporarily blocked off any possibility of entering the channel. Even he couldn't approach, much less these people. So what if they entered the private school? It would only be a waste of time. But at this time, Shang Lingyue's eyebrows furrowed together. Qin Yu's figure involuntarily appeared in his mind. This human cultivator seemed a bit troublesome. That night patrol had already absorbed a great deal of the abyss's strength, and with the support of his will, he had actually been so easily killed. It seemed that Qin Yu was hiding some formidable strength on his body. Perhaps the power he possessed could cause some situations that were out of his control. It was because of this that he had appeared before to temporarily appease Qin Yu, to have him not enter the private school, and to avoid affecting what his lord was doing. As for the promise he made to Qin Yu, it was all fake. The words of an abyssal creature had no meaning except in front of their own race. But he had actually refused. Thinking of this, Shang Lingyue's eyebrows furrowed even tighter and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He had already decided that after he completed the mission given to him by his race, he would immediately kill him. Since he had sensed unease, he only needed to destroy the source and he would be free of worries. The time was approaching. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping led the way. The group didn't stop at all. They passed through the front courtyard of the private school and arrived at the back. But soon they had no choice but to stop. This should be because the round black wooden door that connected the front and back courtyards was now locked. Chapter 10:23. Apart from Yunfeng. Jiang Yuanyi was naturally the most apprehensive of all the second-generation heirs. Although he had not shown too much disrespect before, no one was stupid. They could naturally sense something from the way he looked at Dongzhou Jilly. This was what it meant to take someone's life. No matter how strong or weak they were, no man could endure such provocation, let alone the powerful and incomparably mysterious Qin Yu. Jiang Yuanyi forced himself to remain calm on the surface, but the fear in his heart did not dissipate as time passed. Instead, it gradually became more intense. Because he put himself in Qin Yu's shoes and thought, if he were in Qin Yu's shoes, what would he do next? Thinking of this, Jiang Yuanyi was frightened to death. He felt that his life would be extremely short and miserable. Therefore, in a trance, what Jiang Yuanyi wanted the most was to please Qin Yu and prolong his life. So when everyone stood at the door and looked at the locked black wooden door, he did not know what was wrong with his brain. The door is locked. I'll go open it now. As he spoke, he walked forward. Only when someone pulled him back did he suddenly come to his senses. Facing everyone's eyes, his face suddenly flushed red. Just now, he had only subconsciously wanted to show his worth. After all, worthless people were the easiest to abandon. But this action was really too stupid. Yunfeng and the others looked at him with strange and incredulous eyes, as if they could not understand why they had walked together with such a stupid guy. If this door and this lock were really so simple, Qin Yu and the two black-robed lords would not be standing here. Ahem. Xia Chun coughed lightly. His face under the black robe was full of seriousness. He slowly said, "Let me try." There was a connection between him and this city because of the arrangements left by the ancestors. Although it was not strong, it should be possible to open the lock on a door. At this moment, Xia Chun and Jiang Yuanyi had similar thoughts. Although they had reached an agreement with Qin Yu, since it was a cooperation, both sides naturally had to contribute. It was impossible to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Otherwise, they would lose the right to speak in the distribution afterward. Although Xia-Chun was already mentally prepared that Qin Yu would take the majority, it did not mean that he had given up the idea of fighting for more benefits for himself and Taiping. Just like now. Be careful. I feel like this door isn't simple, Taiping Nun said slowly. A hint of nervousness appeared in her eyes. Xia-Chun smiled and didn't say anything. He walked to the black round wooden door and looked at the lock on it. His face under the black robe became even more solemn. Of course, he knew that this door was not simple. Even though it was right in front of him, when he closed his eyes and tried to sense it, it was actually a blank void. Illusions and whatnot, of course, did not exist. The wooden door was right in front of him, black, round. It was real. The reason why his senses were blank was because the form of its existence was beyond the range of his senses. Taking a deep breath, Xia-Chun placed his hand on the wooden door. He didn't move at all like a statue, but now he began to release a formless and incorporeal majestic aura. It was like a mountain, like a sea. Even though it was completely silent and did not emit a single sound, as long as one approached a certain distance, one would be able to clearly sense the pressure it emitted. The complexions of Yunfeng and the others changed. Subconsciously, awe appeared in their eyes. Lord Blackrobe's methods were truly beyond their imagination. Disregarding everything else, just this suppressive aura alone made them feel as if it weighed tens of thousands of kilograms. If they were to face it head-on, they feared they wouldn't even have a tenth of their cultivation left. Naturally, they didn't know that what Xia-Chun was emitting right now was the aura of the city itself. He was currently borrowing strength from it. No matter how mysterious the private school was, it was still a part of the city. Using the power of the city to break open this door was the right idea. But the problem was that Xia-Chun had underestimated the status of this door in the city. Or rather, its current status had been temporarily raised by some unknown will. A dark golden light flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. He knew that Xia-Chun was about to lose this confrontation. If he retreated now, he would at most suffer some minor injuries. But if he continued, he wouldn't be able to stop even if he wanted to. Qin Yu took a step forward and arrived before Xia-Chun. He reached out and patted his shoulder. Beneath the black robes, Xia-Chun suddenly opened his eyes. His complexion paled, and all the pores on his body opened. Sweat gushed out, drenching his black robes. His face was filled with lingering fear. He gratefully looked at Qin Yu and cupped his hands together. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Qin Yu." Although Xia-Chun didn't know what the final outcome would be if he continued, that feeling was something he absolutely didn't want to face. Qin Yu nodded. "You can draw back. This door isn't something you can open." The faces of the people who were slow to realize what was going on suddenly changed. Their eyes were filled with reverence as they looked at his back. They simply didn't know what had happened before Qin Yu attacked. But from their reactions and conversation, it wasn't hard to guess what had happened. Jian Yuanyi nearly cried. The more terrifying Qin Yu's performance was, the more he felt fear and panic in his heart. Moreover, he had done something incredibly stupid just now. This sort of useless trash, even if he was killed, no one would care. Now, he certainly didn't think that his identity could protect his life. "No, I can't die. I have to save myself." Qin Yu stood in front of the wooden door for a moment. Then he finally attacked. No one could see the dark, golden light surging in his eyes. With the eye of truth, the wooden door itself didn't exist. There was only an endless flow of black energy that revolved around the lock. Although Qin Yu didn't know what this black energy was, his intuition told him that if he was entangled by it, it would be very troublesome. And just now, when Qin Yu interrupted Xia-Chun, he was nearly entangled. With Xia-Chun's cultivation, he was already so terrified before he was entangled by the black energy. From this, it could be seen just how terrifying the black energy was. Qin Yu pointed a finger at the lock. His complexion changed as if he had been pricked by a needle. He quickly withdrew his hand. His finger fell, and he withdrew. The entire process was extremely short, less than half a breath of time. But when Chinyu looked down, he could see that his fingertip had already turned black. His flesh and blood had lost their vitality. Wisps of black energy were flowing through it like tiny worms, constantly trying to drill into its depths. Chinyu frowned. The two hearts in his chest suddenly beat vigorously, pushing a scorching blood energy fluctuation into his fingertip. When his blood energy retreated, the black energy that had fused into his flesh and blood had already disappeared. But the blackened flesh and blood seemed to have lost all its moisture and been dried for countless years, directly turning into powder that fell to the ground. Most importantly, the amount of blood energy he had mobilized was less than half of what it originally was. This was the truly terrifying part. It had to be known that Chinyu's body had already reached the ancient race's indestructible body. Moreover, under the sun and moon force field, it was constantly absorbing and strengthening. The quality of his current blood energy was far higher than that of an ordinary cultivator. Even so, a small portion of his flesh and blood was destroyed in an instant, causing him to lose a portion of his blood energy. If it were any other cultivator, even if they could stop in time, at least one of their arms would have been destroyed. Thinking about it this way, Xia Chun was undoubtedly lucky. He had borrowed the strength of the city and hadn't truly touched the lock. Otherwise, even Chinyu might not have been able to save him. Chinyu lifted a hand and rubbed between his eyebrows. The small wound on his fingertip had already recovered. He revealed a helpless expression. Although he had the eye of truth and could clearly see the essence of this lock, the problem was that although he could see it clearly, he couldn't break it. Of course, if Chinyu didn't hesitate to pay the price, he could forcefully break it. But during this process, half of his body would likely be destroyed by the black energy. The ancient race's indestructible body was said to be undying and indestructible. Even if it was torn to pieces, as long as a piece of flesh and blood remained intact, it could be restored. But this required a great deal of strength. Even with Chinyu's current state, if half of his body was destroyed, he would still fall into a weakened state for a long time after he recovered. In this city that was likely to have already been corroded by the abyssal strength, and there was even a terrifying abyssal life form eyeing him like a tiger watching its prey, to allow himself to fall into a weakened state was undoubtedly the most foolish thing to do. Chinyu suddenly thought of the reason why Shang Lingyue didn't choose to fall out with him when he retreated was because he already knew of the existence of this lock. But from another perspective, even though he knew of the existence of this lock, he still appeared and put forth conditions for Chinyu to retreat. Disregarding whether these conditions were true or false, just this attitude already represented many things. For instance, he didn't want Chinyu to enter this private school at this time. Or, to be more precise, he didn't want Chinyu to attempt to open this lock and enter the private school's backyard. Even if there was only a small chance of success, the more the abyssal life form cared about this lock, the more it proved that it was the key. But even if he realized this, what could he do? He couldn't open this lock. Laughter echoed out from behind them. Several little boys in black and white academy uniforms ran over. As they saw Chinyu and the others in front of them, they restrained their laughter and revealed a bit of deliberate calmness on their young faces. Of course, when these two things were mixed together, it only made them seem more adorable. "Mister, you are blocking our way. Could you please step aside?" One of the children cupped his hands together, his tone earnest. Chinyu's eyes flashed. He turned and stepped to the side. "Little misters, please." Their faces flushed red from this form of address. The several little fellows couldn't hold themselves back. They lowered their heads and walked forwards. When they arrived in front of the door, they lifted their feet and stepped through it as if the wooden door didn't exist. He called me little mister. Haha, this is the first time I've heard someone call me that. That mister is just being polite. If you want to be a mister, you're still far from that. Humph. Just you wait. Sooner or later I will become a teacher in this private school. I will be just as fierce as Mr. Su. Stop bragging. In this world, there is no one more fierce than Mr. Su. Stop dreaming. What followed was the sounds of children playing, accompanied by the sound of running water. After a moment, the children who had been pretending to be calm and collected walked out from the backyard. They looked at Chinyu and the others with a strange expression and then chased after them. Outside the courtyard, there was silence. They had all clearly seen what happened just now. To these children, the wooden door didn't exist at all. If they wanted to enter, they could do so directly. But to outsiders, this was an unbreakable blockade. I already said that you shouldn't waste time here. At some unknown time, the teacher had arrived behind everyone. His eyes were cold and indifferent. The backyard is a secret area of the private school. Only those from the private school can enter. You cannot open this door. It was clear that he knew many things. Chinyu took out a book. He smiled and said, "Mister, am I considered a person from the private school? After all, I am also someone who has books." The teacher sneered. "Of course not." Chinyu didn't fully believe him. But when he brought the book closer to the wooden door, the lock didn't change at all. It really was useless. But he didn't retreat. Instead, he furrowed his eyebrows, as if he were thinking about something. If they really couldn't enter, then this teacher didn't seem to have any reason to pay attention to them. But before he entered the private school, and now he had already appeared twice. Clearly, something was not quite right. Could it be that there was something he hadn't considered? Suddenly, Chinyu reached into his chest. His fingers spread open to reveal a sparkling gold coin. "Can I add on this as well?" The teacher's complexion changed. A trace of annoyance flashed in his eyes. He seemed to have realized something. And at this time, the wooden door in front of everyone suddenly creaked open. The lock was nowhere to be seen, as if it had never existed. The entire courtyard fell deathly silent. Everyone was shocked by the opening of the wooden door. They were also shocked by the gold coin quietly lying in Chinyu's palm. Gold coin, this was gold coin. Everyone knew that in the city, if one used gold to open any transaction, they could directly obtain the inheritance of the myriad soul great Tao. But in the countless times the myriad soul Tao had been opened, there had never been news of a gold coin appearing. It was like a legend, and now they were witnessing with their own eyes the scene of a legend becoming a reality. Chinyu, just who was he? Gold coin, where did he come from? And more importantly, he had the gold coin in his hands, but he hadn't made any transactions at all. What did this mean? It was clear that in his eyes the so-called myriad soul great Tao wasn't important at all. This caused Yunfeng and the others to feel shocked and bitter at the same time. It had to be known that when they entered the myriad soul Tao, their ultimate dream was to obtain the inheritance of the myriad soul great Tao. As long as they could accomplish this, they would become the core of their families in the future, and their future achievements would be limitless. But compared to Chinyu, their so-called dreams seemed worthless. The two sides weren't even on the same level. Beneath the black robes, Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping glanced at each other. They sighed inwardly. As expected, Chinyu knew of the existence of source energy from the very start. If it weren't for this, how could he have looked down on the myriad soul great Tao? Their collaborator was truly mysterious and unfathomable, shrouded in a dense fog. Luckily, the heart-linking fruit had already had a miraculous effect, and they were now on the same side. Otherwise, if they were to become enemies with Chinyu, they feared they wouldn't even know how they died. Outside the private school's long alley, Shang Lingyue was quietly sipping tea in a tea house. Suddenly, the teacup in his hand shattered and scalding tea splashed onto his hand. But he didn't seem to notice it at all. His eyes were locked onto the private school, filled with shock. His Excellency's seal had actually been opened. How was this possible? It had to be known that even he couldn't open His Excellency's seal in his current state. Without any reason, Qin Yu's figure appeared in Shang Lingyue's mind. It was him. It had to be him. This human cultivator was far more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. He took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. A cold light appeared in the depths of Shan Lingyue's eyes. No matter what, he wouldn't allow these people to ruin what His Excellency was doing. As for Qin Yu, he couldn't stay. Shua, his figure flickered. Shan Lingyue leapt out of the tea-house and vanished from sight in several flashes. As for the matter of him destroying the tea set, the tea-house waiter wasn't too far away, but he didn't even glance at it. It was like in his eyes, Shan Lingyue didn't exist at all. Or perhaps he saw it, but didn't dare to express anything. Chapter 1024. Looking at the wooden door that opened on its own, the teacher was stunned for a moment. Then a complex light flashed in his eyes. He took a deep breath and looked at Qin Yu. Although I know you might not listen to me, I must urge you once more. Do not enter the rear courtyard and leave as soon as possible. Qin Yu's heart stirred. It was clear that he wasn't just an ordinary teacher in a private school. There was even a chance that he knew the secrets of the city. Qin Yu wasn't sure if his words were true or false, but he could feel a trace of sincerity. In other words, he should be trustworthy. If he didn't retreat now, there was a chance that he would truly encounter danger. But even if he realized this, did he have a choice? If he really wanted to avoid danger, he would not have entered the myriad soul path. Naturally, he would have been able to rest easy. There were some things that even though they knew were wrong, they still had to do it. Even though they knew that there would be danger, they still had to take the initiative to step into it. So after a moment of silence, Qin Yu nodded slightly to the teacher and said softly, I have my reasons. Thank you for the reminder. He turned around and strode through the wooden door, entering the private school's backyard. There was nothing special about it. The backyard was just an ordinary yard. There were many different kinds of vegetables planted there, and they were divided into blocks. They were clearly separated and kept very well. Not even a few weeds could be seen. It was obvious that the daily care was very good. The only thing that caught his attention was a well not far away. There were still water stains at the mouth of the well, which should have been caused by a group of little attendants when they were washing and playing. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He didn't pause at all as he walked straight towards the well. He stood at the mouth of the well and looked down. The water level was very high, just 3 or 4 meters down from the well mouth. One could see the clear well water. It was like a mirror, clearly reflecting Qin Yu's appearance. He stared at his own reflection for a moment, then turned around and walked back. Look, is it here? Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping hurried to the mouth of the well. It was unknown what methods they used, but after several breaths of time, they spoke almost simultaneously. That's right, it's here. There was a tinge of excitement in his tone. Now, the two of them no longer felt depressed or unwilling about encountering Qin Yu. Rather, they rejoiced in their hearts. If it weren't for Qin Yu, how could the two of them have found the channel left behind by their ancestors so easily? He probably couldn't even enter this backyard. That's great. That's great. His long-cherished dream had finally come true. Even Xia Chun, who was usually composed, couldn't help but mutter to himself. He grabbed the primordial Taoist nun's hand and seemed to have lost his composure. Of course, the most important reason was that he knew very well what sort of astonishing good fortune was hidden beneath the passageway. Even if Qin Yu took away the vast majority of it, he and Taiping would still be reborn, and their future possibilities would be limitless. Yun Feng and the others were also overjoyed. Even if they didn't have a share of the lucky chances contained within the well, only after Lord Blackrobe and Qin Yu were satisfied would they be able to realize their dreams. At this time, everyone was overjoyed, but in their excitement, they didn't notice the dignified look on Qin Yu's face. His eyes fell on the entrance to the backyard. The teacher was standing there, his expression incomparably indifferent. As he watched them rush in, he didn't reveal any emotion at all, as if he weren't the one who had solemnly warned Qin Yu just now. He didn't leave, nor did he leave. He only stood there, calmly looking at them. Of course, there wasn't any envy or anything like that. Rather, from this calmness, Qin Yu could feel a bit of ridicule or perhaps pity. At this moment, it was like a hand had appeared in Qin Yu's heart, gently pushing aside a portion of the fog that shrouded his mind. Opening the wooden door could only be considered the beginning of the adventure. From the moment they stepped into the backyard and locked onto the well, the true danger would arrive. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, we will attempt to open the seal within the well. We cannot be disturbed during the process. Qin Yu gathered his thoughts. He slowly said, I will stand guard for you. His eyes swept over Yunfeng and the others. Their complexions changed, and they hurriedly drew back, restraining their auras. As he thought, these second-generation young masters were quite smart. Shua, space-twisted, Shang Lingyue's figure appeared in the private school. In front of him was the already opened wooden door. Although he had already sensed it, when he saw it with his own eyes, his pupils still shrank and he revealed a look of shock. It had to be known that this was a seal that came from the Lord, a manifestation of the Lord's will. Even he didn't dare to violate it in the slightest. For Qin Yu to be able to open the wooden door, that alone was enough. Shan Lingyue valued him even more in his heart. What the Lord was doing couldn't be disturbed. He couldn't take any risks. If he acted in broad daylight, he would be greatly restricted and he might even suffer a backlash from the city. But right now, he couldn't care about such things. Killing intent surged in Shang Lingyue's eyes. Traces of blood red appeared and his calm and gentle aura shattered, turning into endless cruelty. But at this time, the teacher standing beside the wooden door suddenly turned his head and looked at him. This gaze was extremely calm, without any emotion at all. But it caused Shang Lingyue's heart to tremble and an instinctive fear to rise in him. It was as if he were facing those noble and ancient life forms of his race, those incomparably powerful life forms. Shang Lingyue's eyes widened. The spatial fluctuations that wrapped around him even paused for a brief moment. He took a deep breath and suppressed the surging strength in his body. Then he respectfully bowed. But at this time, the teacher had already turned his gaze away. He didn't look at him again, as if nothing had happened just now, or perhaps all of this was a coincidence. It was impossible for this to be a coincidence, and it definitely wasn't an illusion. Shang Lingyue's thoughts raced. He didn't understand why the Lord had stopped him, but since the Lord's will had arrived, he could only obey. He restrained his strength and stood motionless, waiting for the Lord's next instructions. In order to express his respect, Shang Lingyue lowered his head. Besides that first glance, he didn't dare to look at anything else. So, he didn't notice the self-deprecating look in the teacher's eyes. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping had already started. Yunfeng and the others had restrained their auras in fear of arousing Qin Yu's dissatisfaction. None of them noticed the changes outside the door. Of course, this didn't include Qin Yu. The moment Shang Lingyue arrived, he had already sensed the abnormal fluctuations. His body tensed and his two hearts raced. If he said he wasn't nervous or fearful, that would be a lie. But now, it wasn't as if he didn't have the strength to resist. Not to mention Yunfeng and the other powerful second-generation youths. Just that walnut in his hand gave Qin Yu a considerable amount of confidence. So what if it was an abyssal life form? If he really angered him, then he would detonate the strength of the walnut. No matter how fierce you were, you would still have to howl at him. But what surprised Qin Yu was that the abyssal life form's aura fell silent after it appeared. It didn't leave, nor did it make any further movements, as if it were waiting for something. His thoughts raced. Qin Yu's eyes flashed, and he looked at the door, at the silent teacher. He didn't know if it was a coincidence, but the teacher also looked at Qin Yu. Their gazes met, but neither of them could sense what the other was thinking. However, Qin Yu suddenly discovered that the private school tutor's pupils were pitch black like ink. Along with his scholarly and sparse aura, he seemed particularly straightforward and efficient, adding a bit more elegance to his demeanor. But these pupils were far too pure and pitch black. They were like a rich and unresolvable darkness that connected to the unknown abyss. Qin Yu's scalp tingled. He discovered that he had made a terrible mistake. But if this was really the case, then why didn't this teacher do anything? Instead, he just stared blankly on as they opened the channel and extracted the source energy beneath the city. It had to be known that the source energy suppressed beneath the city didn't belong to the city itself. Rather, it came from some horrifying existence that carried the mark of the abyss. Although he didn't know how powerful this existence was, there was no doubt how terrifying it was. Perhaps just a single thought from this existence would be enough to cause their souls to collapse. Flee now. No, there was absolutely no chance. If this person really did have evil thoughts towards them, then fleeing now would only hasten their own deaths. It seemed that their only choice was to force their way forwards. After all, since this person hadn't done anything yet, there might still be a chance to turn things around. After all, the goal of this city was to suppress the abyss. Even if it had been corroded by the strength of the abyss, there might still be some remnant strength left. As Qin Yu thought of this, a great deal of the suppressed fear in his heart dissipated. He thought of an even faster method. The abyssal creature that had entered the city had maintained its silence the entire time. Even when they entered the private school not long ago, it had only vaguely threatened them and hadn't truly torn apart all pretense of cordiality. Without a doubt, this confirmed Qin Yu's speculations. Even though this city had been corroded by the abyss, it hadn't obtained complete control. The only chance of survival was here. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. His eyes fell on Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping. They had already opened up the channel left behind by their ancestors. But now, Qin Yu couldn't help but suspect that this channel wasn't a secret from the start. At the very least, the abyssal creature that occupied Shang Lingyue's body was well aware of this. As for where things would end up, Qin Yu was no longer able to judge, nor did he have the qualifications to control it. It was like he was wrapped up in turbulent undercurrents deep underground. He tumbled forwards in the pitch-black darkness, but he had no idea where he was going. Beneath the black robes, beads of sweat began to appear on Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping's faces. White steam drilled out, constantly rising upwards. The channel was indeed here, but the difficulty of opening it surpassed their imaginations. It was like it was filled with an extremely viscous substance, and wanting to split it open required an astonishing amount of strength. If it was only like this, then, although it was a bit more difficult, the two of them could still open the channel bit by bit. At most it would only take some time. But soon, the two of them discovered that as the channel continued downwards, after entering a certain section, it suddenly stiffened. This was similar to a dense accumulation of energy. Under the influence of external factors, it solidified and crystallized. It gave them a feeling as if an incomparably hard stone had been shoved into the entire channel. No matter how they tried, they couldn't move it at all. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, we've encountered some trouble. Xia Chun forced a smile. He had already confirmed that Qin Yu was the key to obtaining the source energy, so he naturally wouldn't hide it. There is a dense mass of strength sealed in the channel. We cannot disperse it. Qin Yu stood at the mouth of the well. He looked down. The calm well water was now bubbling and bubbling, as if it were being boiled. Faint traces of icy cold aura spread out, forming a thin layer of ice crystals on the walls of the well that spread upwards. Now, the mouth of the well was covered in a layer of frost. Qin Yu could feel the astonishing chill contained within. Deep in his eyes, a dark golden light surged. After looking at it for a moment, Qin Yu suddenly said, "I need someone to go down. Follow my orders and disperse the strength blocking the channel." Deep in his eyes, a dark golden light surged. After looking for a moment, he suddenly said, "I need someone to go down. Follow my orders and disperse the strength blocking the channel." Deep in his eyes, a dark golden light surged. After looking at it for a moment, Qin Yu suddenly said, "I need someone to go down. Follow my orders and disperse the strength blocking the channel." Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping were opening the channel with all their strength. For Qin Yu to say something like this, it was clear he wanted to choose one of them. This, of course, wouldn't make them happy. Although they didn't know where this well led to, the icy cold aura floating in the air was enough to show how terrifying it was. It was easy to go in, but it would be difficult to come out again. Or perhaps they would go in alive and come out dead. It's not me, it can't be me. Yun Feng and the others knew that facing Qin Yu's will, unless they shed all pretense of cordiality, it was impossible to go against him. Of course, in their opinion, facing the mysterious and incomparably powerful Qin Yu, if they shed all pretense of cordiality, their fate would be even more miserable. They could only pray that they wouldn't be chosen. "I'll go." Yunfeng's eyes widened, looking at Jiang Yuanyi, who walked out with a resolute expression. She suddenly felt relieved. Then she felt incredulous. She felt as if she had gotten to know Jiang Yuanyi all over again. In the past, she only thought that although this boy had a good background and decent aptitude, he was too narrow-minded and petty. But now all of this was nothing. Instead, there was a kind of brave light being released from his body. Of course, the so-called brave light didn't exist at all. The reason Yunfeng's opinion of him had changed was because Jiang Yuanyi had offered himself to them on his own initiative. If so, they would all be safe. That's right, he had offered himself. In their opinion, Jiang Yuanyi's decision was already sending half his body into the gates of hell. Qin Yu's eyes fell down. After a moment of surprise, he nodded. "All right, it's you." Jiang Yuanyi shivered. He clenched his teeth and walked to the well. Seeing that Qin Yu didn't stop him, he leapt in. His body rapidly sank down. He could feel the icy cold aura drilling into his body through his pores. His heart was filled with fear and madness. "I have to go all out. If I handle this matter well, I might be able to forgive myself for offending Qin Yu. Otherwise, even if I'm fine today, I might not be able to leave Myriad's soul Dao alive." It had to be said that sometimes it was dangerous to judge others by oneself. If one was unlucky, they would end up in the current situation. Qin Yu could roughly guess what Jiang Yuanyi was thinking. While he found it strange and laughable, he was actually calm and indifferent. In the current situation, even he didn't know what his fate would be. So how could he care too much about the fate of these second-generation juniors? Everyone here was a part of the game. Whether they lived or died would depend on their own luck. Chapter 10:25. The well didn't seem deep, but if one truly jumped in, they would discover that this was just an illusion. Jiang Yuanyi rapidly sank down, and what caused his heart to tremble was that a suction force erupted from the bottom of the well, wrapping around him and causing him to sink faster and faster. The icy cold aura around him became stronger and stronger as it continued to sink. It was like tiny needles that constantly pierced into his body, ignoring his cultivation and penetrating deep into his bones. It was as if his entire body was about to be sealed in ice. After an incomparably long period of time, there was a dull thump as Jiang Yuanyi smashed through the surface of the water and plunged into the bone-chilling well water. From the outside, this well water seemed clear and transparent, but after truly falling in, he discovered that it was completely pitch black without the least bit of light. An indescribable and invisible panic erupted from the depths of his heart, flooding Jiang Yuanyi's mind. Because of the icy cold invading his body, his pale face lost all color. He subconsciously struggled, trying to stabilize his body in the water. But the pitch-black well water was as thick as mud and possessed an astonishing viscosity. Every movement required a tremendous amount of strength. And at this time, not only did the suction force not disappear, but it became even stronger. All of this caused Jiang Yuanyi to inevitably fall into a state of panic. His struggles increased, and a thin layer of ice began to appear on the surface of his body. As he moved, it constantly shattered and froze, emitting cracking sounds. It's over, it's over. I'm going to die in here. I don't want to die, I want to live. Save me, save me. As he wailed in his heart, a calm voice resounded in his mind. If you really want to die, you can continue struggling. Jiang Yuanyi froze in place. This was because there was no way he would mistake this voice for Qin Yu. As if grasping at the last straw of hope, Jiang Yuanyi forcefully suppressed his fear and forced himself to remain still. It was only now that he discovered that while he was still, even though the suction force didn't decrease, the suppression of the well water had mostly dissipated. I'll speak, you listen. Qin Ning continued to speak. This well water is the strength you need to expel. Follow my instructions and attack with all your strength. Remember, I said with all my strength. If you want to live, you had best do as I say. This is the first time. This is the moment. Attack! Jiang Yuanyi roared out loud. He swore that he had brought out 120% of his strength. Moreover, in this life or death crisis, the might of this strike was several times greater than his usual attacks. As his fist punched out, a deep rumbling sound echoed in his ears. He felt a stabbing pain in his arm, as if he had punched a thick iron plate. However, the most frightening thing was that with this punch, the suction force from the water in the well suddenly increased by a few notches. Jiang Yuanyi's heart shook and his complexion paled. Fear gushed out from his eyes. His first thought was that Qin Yu had made a mistake. It was clear that right now, Qin Yu was his only chance of survival. If his judgment was wrong, then he would die without a doubt. Put away your random thoughts. Although I don't care about your life or death, you still have value in living. Qin Yu sneered. Now is the time. Punch out a second time. Although I don't care about your life or death, you still have value in living. Qin Yu sneered. Now is the time. Punch out a second time. That's right, I still have value. Qin, you will not give up on me. Jiang Yuanyi didn't have time to think. He instinctively punched out a second time. Dong! With a dull thud, his ears began to ring and his field of vision darkened. The recoil of strength left his chest heavy and he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. Bang! The suction force from the bottom of the well crazily rose. Jiang Yuanyi's sinking speed nearly doubled. He was like a stone that had been tossed into the water. The cold strength released by the black well water caused the layer of ice covering his body to instantly become incomparably thick. Even the blood flowing through his body seemed as if it would freeze over. There is still one final strike. Take out your trump card. As a second-generation young master with an extraordinary background, don't tell me that you don't have a trump card in this desperate situation. Now is the time for you to use your trump card. Qin Yu said in a low voice, a dignified tone in his voice. Remember, this opportunity only lasts for an instant. If you can't grasp it, you will really be pulled to the bottom. Although I don't know what is down there, you will absolutely die a miserable death. It was unknown whether it was because the suction force was too strong or because of the ice sealing his body. But Qin Yu's voice sounded weak to Jiang Yuanyi's ears. Moreover, there was an ethereal feeling to it. But there was one thing he could not deny. If he couldn't grasp the timing of this punch, he would die a miserable death. Death was the greatest fear and resistance of all living beings in the world. Even if one fell into a hopeless situation, as long as there was a slim chance of survival, no one would give up. Moreover, this was Jiang Yuanyi, a second-generation young master with a formidable background. If he couldn't die, he had to live. In the pitch-black well water, within the thick ice, a brilliant light erupted from Jiang Yuanyi's eyes. This was his final attempt to survive in his despair. Trump cards, of course, he had them. As Qin Yu said, if he didn't use them now, when would he? Bang! A powerful aura instantly erupted from his body. The thick layer of ice covering Jiang Yuanyi's body instantly shattered into countless pieces, each piece wrapped in a terrifying strength. They pierced through the well water and smashed into the walls of the well. With a loud rumble, the entire ground trembled. Azure flame crows surged out of Jiang Yuanyi's body, completely isolating him from all the outside world's influence. Unfortunately, this situation was only maintained for a short while. In less than a breath of time, the cold aura once again invaded. The blazing blue flames immediately dimmed. The light it released was unable to penetrate the pitch-black well water. It was firmly suppressed and stuck to the surface of Jiang Yuanyi's body. Jiang Yuanyi's complexion changed. His trump card had already been detonated. This blue flame was a deviant flame that existed in the world. After refining it into the body, it could allow a cultivator to release a strength that far surpassed their limits for a short period of time. Although there was only one chance to use it, and the deviant flame would dissipate afterwards, it was enough to reverse the entire situation in a hopeless situation. But now, it seemed that it had only managed to buy some breathing room for Jiang Yuanyi. Furthermore, this little bit of breathing space was quickly disappearing as time passed. At this speed, the deviant flame strength would be exhausted in several breaths of time. And now, Qin Yu hadn't asked him to attack yet. Hurry, hurry! If he was any slower, there really wouldn't be anything he could do. Every breath of time seemed to be stretched and twisted, becoming especially long. The blue flames on Jiang Yuanyi's body were nearly extinguished. Attack! Jiang Yuanyi roared. He lifted his hand and punched forwards. This punch gathered all his despair and fear, as well as the remaining strength of the blue deviant flame. Kacha! A clear sound echoed in his ears. But at this moment, Jiang Yuanyi wasn't sure if his own bones had broken or if he had broken something. A violent feeling soon spread through his body. His bones had broken. Jiang Yuanyi's eyes filled with despair. But right at this moment, the pitch-black and ice-cold well water that enveloped him suddenly parted to the sides. Of course, this wasn't accurate. The truth was that the cold and darkness in the well water was rapidly dissipating. Jiang Yuanyi discovered that he was floating in the water several meters above the ground. The well water was incomparably clear and sweet. He was saved. At this moment he cried out loud. It was unknown whether or not it was because his hand had been completely deformed because of the severe fracture. On the ground, beneath the black robes, Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping both revealed looks of pleasant surprise. The formidable resistance they felt had now completely vanished. Glancing at each other, the two of them didn't hesitate to erupt with all the strength in their bodies. Bang! With a dull explosion, the entire private school trembled. A massive amount of well water gushed out from the mouth of the well, throwing the haggard Jiang Yuanyi into the air. Jiang Yuanyi was curled up into a ball, his face twisted as if he had been caught off guard. The well water had struck him in his vitals, leaving behind a sour taste in his mouth. "It's open," Xia Chun said with pleasant surprise. In truth, at this moment, Qin Yu didn't need him to say anything. He could already feel the aura emitting from the well. An intense desire erupted from his body. It wasn't just his mortal body, but also his soul. Was this the source of that horrifying evil demon that was being suppressed? At this moment, Qin Yu suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. A question rose in his mind. If this was really the case, then why did he have such an instinctive and intense desire towards the source of this evil demon? But at this time, Qin Yu didn't have time to think about this. A light sigh echoed in his ears, one that was filled with helplessness and melancholy. He turned and looked at the silent teacher outside the rear courtyard. The teacher's pitch-black pupils were now expanding outwards. The moment his eyes met Qin Yu's, they completely occupied his eyes. "I already said that you would use the way to leave. So why didn't you listen to me? Greed will be the greatest original sin that will lead to your death." Qin Yu's pupils violently shrank. Without hesitation, he rushed towards the ground, towards the well that had opened up a channel. Shwa! He leapt up and rushed into the well. He could clearly see the surface of the water from head to toe. But at this time, an icy voice sounded out in his ears. Chinyu, I admit that I did deceive you, but everything is over now. Deep fate descends. Bang! A terrifying aura instantly erupted. An unimaginably cold and gloomy current swept out in all directions, covering the entire rear courtyard. The world in front of Chin-yu suddenly changed. The walls of the well turned crimson, and the surface was uneven and covered with mucus, as if it were the intestines of some terrifying giant creature. In the next moment, the channel violently twisted. Chin-yu's complexion changed, and he stepped forwards. Bang! Mucus flew out and fragments rained down. Chin-yu rushed out from within. His black robes had been corroded into tatters, and his exposed flesh and blood had turned red. He felt a slight stabbing pain. As far as the eye could see, the entire private school had changed beyond recognition. The sky was a murky dark red, and the layers of clouds were rolling like a thick accumulation of blood. In the rear courtyard, the neatly planted vegetables were like the claws of a demon, constantly twisting and wriggling in the air. Shang Linghua smiled. Deep in his eyes, there was an icy chill that couldn't be dispelled. As he looked at Chin-yu, killing intent surged out from him. At this time, meeting Chin-yu's gaze, he spread out his arms and his smile widened. Welcome to my world, the great and destined abyss that will occupy and rule this world. Bang, bang, bang. The crimson ground that seemed as if it had been soaked in blood suddenly broke apart. Several thick flesh and blood tentacles drilled out. The ends of each tentacle split open, revealing dense circles of fierce fangs. Like pythons, they held through the air, aiming to bite at Chin-yu. At the same time, the air around Chin-yu suddenly became thick and sticky. A powerful oppressive strength filled the air with a sticky and slippery feeling. At the same time, he was completely suppressed. Abyss, this was the abyss. Chin-yu's complexion paled. This was caused by the uncontrollable fear in his heart. But fear didn't mean that he would just wait for death. As he looked at Shang Linghua, there was a calm look in his eyes. Perhaps he had underestimated the strength of the terrifying abyssal creature that occupied Shang Linghua's body. Or perhaps in the world of deep destiny, the abyssal creature's strength had been greatly increased. In short, Chin-yu was certain that he couldn't resist his opponent's slaughter. Yun Feng and the other second-generation cultivators might not be weak, but at this time they couldn't help him at all. But it wasn't as if he didn't have the strength to fight back. Within his chest, 2 hearts wildly beat, pushing his blood energy to rapidly circulate. Chin-yu exerted strength in his fingers, and there was a light, cracking sound in his hand. In the next moment, he threw it out. A walnut appeared in everyone's line of sight. In the midst of panic and fear, everyone who had placed all their hopes on Chin-yu suddenly had stunned expressions. Their eyes widened with disbelief, including Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping. Everyone was wailing in their hearts, despair in their eyes. Big brother, what are you doing? Is this how you, a person with a mysterious background and powerful background, should act in the face of danger? You threw out a walnut and even opened it for someone else. Do you think he will like the taste of walnuts more and let us go? Or do you really want to use this walnut to smash him to death? Shang Linghua furrowed his eyebrows. Although he wasn't too strong, he no longer dared to have any thoughts of killing Chin-yu. But this really was an incomparably ordinary walnut. He didn't feel anything wrong about it. Even then, Shang Linghua was still unwilling to take the slightest risk. He raised his hand and flicked his sleeve, causing a ball of pitch-black abyssal devil-chi to surge out from the void and transform into a large hand that grabbed onto the walnut. However, when the hand formed of abyssal demonic energy grabbed the walnut, Shang Linghua's expression changed drastically. His eyes widened in shock. Without any hesitation, the power in his body erupted. Roiling black, abyssal demonic energy descended and wrapped around his body. In the next instant, an extremely dazzling bolt of lightning shot out from the crack in the walnut. Mobile reading access. M. Chapter 10:26. As he threw out the walnut and saw the shining thunder, Qin Yu's heart fiercely shrank and he felt his entire body turn ill. This thing actually attacked indiscriminately. It didn't care about the existence of its master at all. Qin Yu didn't even have time to curse out loud. He didn't even have time to think before his body instinctively reacted in this dangerous situation. With a deep roar, the two hearts in his chest began to wildly beat. He stimulated his blood vitality to erupt, releasing the strongest strength of the ancient immortal body. In the next moment, raging thunder howled, submerging his figure. The rumbling in his ears suddenly disappeared. He was like a rag that was sent flying away, tumbling about. His consciousness buzzed and he nearly collapsed. What followed was endless pain from his limbs and bones. This feeling was like he had been thrown into a rapidly spinning barrel of knives. Every time he spun, countless wounds would open up on his body. Moreover, these knives were covered in bright red chili oil mixed with a great deal of salt. Of course, this was only a very simple description. In truth, the pain it produced was 10 times, 100 times more terrifying. Within the thunder, Qin Yu's body was torn apart. He was sucked into the raging thunder and burned to ashes. But the attribute of the ancient immortal body was that it was nearly undying. As long as one's blood vitality wasn't exhausted, they could constantly be reborn. The result was that Qin Yu fell into the thunder, constantly repeating the process of destruction and rebirth. The pain he had to withstand seemed endless. If this was it, Qin Yu could still withstand it. After all, with his current will, it wasn't something that could be destroyed by the pain of destruction. What left him uneasy and even fearful was that the terrifying thunder that gushed out from the walnut was even faster than the ancient immortal body's rebirth. In this sort of situation, even if Qin Yu's blood vitality was abundant, once the ancient immortal body was completely destroyed, all that awaited him was death. The ancient immortal body was known as undying and indestructible. It required any part of the body to remain. Even if it was just a little finger, it could still be reborn. But once the entire body was turned to ash, he originally thought that the walnut in his hand was his trump card to kill his enemy and reverse the situation. But he never imagined that it would end up delivering his own life instead. How laughable! As Qin Yu was tormented by the thunder and nearing destruction, there was someone who was suffering even more than he was. However, the devastating roar of thunder drowned out his howls. The so-called abyssal descent was naturally not the true abyssal world. Rather, it relied on the powerful strength of the abyssal life forms to forcefully distort the world, turning it into the abyssal for a short time. Once completed, the strength of the abyssal creatures within would be greatly enhanced. In addition, the entire abyssal world would be under his control. He could control it with a single thought. It was equivalent to his own domain. However, everything in the world abided by some invisible law of balance. Such a powerful method naturally had its drawbacks. When the abyssal world endured a power that exceeded its limits, it would cause a terrible backlash against the abyssal life forms themselves. This was because, to a certain extent, the so-called abyssal descent was the extension and evolution of the abyssal creature's power. It was precisely because of this that the exploding walnut released a monstrous destructive lightning. Although it was an indiscriminate attack, Xiangling had withstood at least 80% of its power. This feeling could be understood as having a very thick firecracker placed in his stomach. Of course, the might of a walnut was thousands of times more terrifying than a firecracker. No matter how thick it was useless because the thunder released from this walnut had a terrifying name, the thunder of nirvanic extermination. What was nirvanic extermination? It was the deathly stillness of the world, the annihilation of all. Strictly speaking, this was a kind of thunder that didn't originally exist between the heavens and earth. It was something that relied on some medium to compress and fuse the power of thunder to the limit. Only then could one finally obtain it. Of course, those that had the qualifications to fuse and refine the thunder of nirvanic extermination weren't ordinary characters. Otherwise, just touching it would cause one's life force to be annihilated. Who would dare to touch it? Moreover, there was one more point. Countless years ago, when the world of life and the abyssal abyss first met, a great calamity erupted that swept through the world. At that time, the thunder of nirvanic extermination didn't exist. This was because this was a weapon of war created to deal with abyssal life forms. It could ignore the corrosion of abyssal demonic energy and erupt with an even greater killing power against abyssal life forms. Otherwise, with the strength of the abyssal life form that occupied Shang Lingyue's body, no matter how terrifying a walnut containing powerful thunder was, it wouldn't be able to cause much damage to him in the abyssal world. But now the tumbling abyssal demonic energy stimulated the might of the thunder of nirvanic extermination. The entire abyssal world began to rapidly collapse. Shan Lingyue's body was nearly destroyed. All that remained was a black heart wrapped in a thin layer of flesh and blood that wildly beat. The thunder of nirvanic extermination. It was actually the thunder of nirvanic extermination. He didn't believe that this was just a coincidence. With Qin Yu's cultivation, he absolutely didn't have the qualifications to control it. Could it be that the erosion of the abyssal abyss in the myriad soul, Tao, had already been discovered by the world of life, and that Qin Yu was a chess piece they had placed down? But at this time, there was no more time for him to think. If he didn't escape from here soon, all that awaited him was death. Within the wildly beating heart, roars came out. "My lord, save me, save me." As the most optimistic junior powerhouse of the nightmare demon race, his goal was to grow into a supreme king amongst the abyssal races. He wanted to personally lead the brave warriors of the abyssal races to occupy the world of life and turn it into their pasture. How could he die? Of course, he couldn't die. The entire backyard of the private school had already been completely abyssed. However, there was one exception. That was the wooden door that connected the backyard to the front yard. The teacher stood there with a calm expression, as if everything that happened around him had nothing to do with him. It was only at this moment that he heard Shang Lingyue's roars that he frowned. Then he lifted a hand and pressed forward. The abyssal world was like a bubble at this moment. After being gently popped, it directly shattered into countless pieces, tumbling and disappearing. What disappeared along with it was the raging thunder of nirvanic extermination wrapped around the abyssal demonic energy and annihilated. Shan Lingyue, who only had a black heart left, didn't dare to stay any longer. Space twisted and he vanished from sight. The abyss shattered and the thunder dissipated. Xia, Chen, Taoist priestess Taiping, and the others who had barely survived felt as if they had passed through hell. They all lay on the ground, gasping for breath. If it weren't for the wounds caused by the raging thunder on their bodies, they would have suspected that everything they experienced just now was just an illusion. But this wasn't an illusion in the end. All of them looked up at the teacher standing beside the black wooden door, endless fear and awe in their eyes. Just who was he? Putong! The sound of water falling sounded out, breaking the silence of the backyard. The teacher looked at the well. His black pupils were still pitch black, but they no longer had that heart-palpitating feeling from before. With a light sigh, he closed his eyes. Xia Chen, Taoist priestess Taiping, and the others were left dumbfounded. Just what sort of method was this? By closing his eyes, was it because he didn't want to see them and wanted them to hurry up and scram? Or was there some other meaning? For better or worse, he should at least say something. They were stuck in this awkward situation. It was really uncomfortable. Of course, they only dared to think about these thoughts in their hearts, not daring to reveal them at all. As for leaving, if this teacher didn't say anything, who would dare to take even half a step forward? The well water was cold, but as the cold seeped into his body, it caused the pain around him to weaken by a great deal. But Qin Yu was well aware that he had suffered a great loss this time. Although he hadn't died in the bombardment of the walnuts he had thrown out, it wasn't something he could recover from in a short period of time. Moreover, the most important thing was that the walnuts he had thrown out had nearly cost him his life, but he still hadn't been able to kill Shang Lingyue. Since Shang Lingyue hadn't died, he would come looking for revenge sooner or later, let alone his current half-dead state. Even if he were to return to his peak, he feared he would still die without a doubt. As Qin Yu was feeling bitter, a voice suddenly sounded out. "It's not too late to leave now. Otherwise, you will most likely die." This voiced Shua. Qin Yu's eyes shot open. He saw a phantom appear in the well water. Its face was blurry, but it gave him a familiar feeling. "It's you." His pupils violently shrank. The phantom in the water frowned, as if he never thought that Qin Yu would be able to see through his true appearance. Ripples flowed, and the face became clear. Shockingly, it was none other than the teacher who was sitting there with his eyes closed. His expression was calm as he looked at Qin Yu. "There are many secrets hidden on your body. Even I cannot clearly sense them. But my intuition tells me that if you continue to live, you will have an inestimable effect on the entire world of living beings. This is why I have reminded you again and again. This city is doomed to fall. Perhaps you have already guessed that the strength of the abyss has already corroded it. It has fused with me and cannot be separated. Take advantage of my lucid state to leave. Announce to the entire world of living beings that they will never attempt to enter the myriad soul Tao again." Qin Yu suddenly said, "This should be the second time we've met, right? You also appeared when I was participating in the 3 mountains test." The teacher was silent for a moment. "Your senses are sharp, so you should be able to judge that everything I say is true." Qin Yu said in a low voice, "You want to seal off the myriad soul Tao?" The teacher had no expression. "Since there is no other way, continuing to suppress the strength of the abyss is the best choice." He turned to leave. This was clearly a reminder to Qin Yu that he had no intention of staying. "Hold on." Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He stared at the teacher's back and said, "I want to know the secrets of the myriad soul Tao." The teacher didn't turn around. "This inheritance is wrong to begin with. I will not give it to you. No, I don't want the inheritance. I only want to know how to unravel the myriad soul Tao." Qin Yu bowed. This simple movement caused many wounds to open up all over his body. Blood gushed out and poured into the well water. But strangely, the well water wasn't dyed red at all. Instead, it simply vanished. "You want to unravel the myriad soul Tao." "My wife is one of the split souls of a cultivator of the myriad soul Tao. I hope that she can continue living." The teacher said, "Give up. The myriad soul Tao is wrong. It is imperfect to begin with, and the fruit that is born from a wrong foundation is impossible to change." Qin Yu didn't stand up. In this world, there are no absolutes. Even if they exist, they only exist within a certain relative range. So, the myriad soul Tao must have a way to unravel it. I beg you to help me. No matter what price I have to pay, I am willing. She is just a woman. Not to mention the many secrets you hide. With your current cultivation, you can obtain countless things with just a thought. Is it worth it to save her? Worth it. The teacher was silent. He seemed to be deep in thought. After a long time, he said, "Qin Yu, I might know of a way to unravel the myriad soul Tao, but you only have one chance. If you fail, you will be destroyed along with this city." From the bottom of my heart, I'm not optimistic about it. What you should do is to leave this place immediately. Now, tell me your answer. Qin Yu's eyes were cloudy and uncertain. He feared death, and if he could, he didn't want to be placed in a perilous situation. However, the teacher's words implied that he was trying to crack the myriad soul path. The difficulty seemed to be far greater than he had imagined. In other words, even if he obtained the qualifications to speak directly with the peach blossom spring in the future, he still wouldn't be able to rescue Ningling, apart from the method you mentioned. Is there any other way to crack the myriad soul Tao? The teacher was silent, and his silence was, in fact, an indication of his attitude. This was their only chance. Qin Yu took a deep breath. A decisive light flashed in his eyes. I must try. The teacher turned and looked at him with a deep gaze. If death comes, I hope you won't regret the choice you make now. Shua! His figure vanished from sight. In the next moment, a massive amount of blood, red, gushed out from the pure well water, rapidly spreading outwards. Bang, bang. This was Qin Yu's 2 hearts, wildly beating in his chest. It was an instinctive desire that came from his marrow and couldn't be suppressed at all. Without needing to galvanize it, all the pores on Qin Yu's body opened and wildly absorbed the blood, red strength, mixed within the well water. In the private school's rear courtyard, the teacher opened his eyes. You may leave. Everyone was nervous and anxious, as if they had been granted amnesty. They let out a breath of relief, bowed, and hurriedly rushed out. If they didn't leave now, when would they? Wait. The teacher lifted a hand and pointed. The 2 of you stay behind. Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping stiffened. Although they didn't want to, their instincts told them that it was best not to resist. Or, even if they did resist, their fates would only be more miserable than they were now. Yun Feng and the others let out a long breath of relief. They didn't have time to express their sympathy to the 2 black-robed lords. They picked up the unconscious Jiang Yuanyi and rushed out. What nonsense! If they didn't hurry up and run, what if this person felt that there weren't enough people and called out to them again? As for the promise the 2 black-robed lords made, their lives were about to be forfeited. So why were they thinking about such things? The opening of the myriad soul Tao this time was truly strange. It didn't match the information that their family had provided them before. With this, even if their family blamed them in the future, they would be able to shirk responsibility and say that it was all because their information was wrong. It wasn't easy for them to survive. In fact, as Yun Feng and the others hurriedly ran out of the private school and swore never to approach this place again, they didn't know that it was indeed extremely difficult to survive in this city. Because true despair had yet to arrive, in a corner of the private school's rear courtyard, there were several bamboo chairs placed around. They should be used to temporarily rest while they worked. The teacher walked over and casually sat down. He looked at the neatly cleaned vegetable field in front of him. His face didn't reveal any emotion, making it impossible to guess what he was thinking. Xia Chun grasped Taoist Nun Taiping's hand, indicating with his eyes that she shouldn't speak any further. He took a deep breath and bowed. My lord, I am willing to stay behind and listen to your orders. Could you allow me to leave? Taoist Taiping's eyes widened. Xia Chun! Shut up! Xia Chun roared out loud. He lifted a hand and pulled down his black robes. He respectfully knelt on the ground. If my lord agrees, Xia Chun swears to obey any order you give. The teacher glanced at him and expressionlessly said, Is Xiahou Bo your ancestor? Xia Chun was startled. The awe on his face deepened, and he respectfully nodded. Then this woman is a descendant of the Sun family. The teacher had a faint expression. In the past, when your ancestors were building the myriad soul Tao, they were tempted by the abyss and left behind a contingency plan. This caused the power of the abyss to leak out, causing the entire myriad soul Tao to fall short of success. This crime is punishable by the execution of all 10 bloodline clans, and their souls will be drawn out and refined. Puff! Taoist Taiping's legs weakened, and she slumped to the ground. Beside her, Xia Chun wasn't much better. His face was pale white, and he was sweating profusely. Just now, when the teacher spoke, they felt as if they were standing on the edge of destruction. It was like they would fall into the abyss in the next moment and be torn to pieces, never to reincarnate. After an unknown period of time, the 2 of them regained their composure. They looked up at the silent teacher, and their pupils shrank in fear. At this time, there was the sound of splashing water. Qin, you flew out from the well and landed on the ground. As Xia Chun and Taoist Taiping saw Qin Yu, their eyes brightened. They subconsciously wanted to speak, but they held themselves back. Qin Yu frowned. He didn't know why the two of them were here, but he guessed that it was the teacher's orders. He immediately suppressed his thoughts and cupped his hands together. Greetings, teacher. This person's identity was now clear. He was the self-condensed consciousness of the myriad soul Tao. Or it could be said that he was the current incarnation of this city. He had fused with the abyss, hiding the yin and yang sides of the abyss. What they faced now was the yang side of the city. Otherwise, with a wave of his hand, the three of them would likely be turned to ash. The teacher glanced at Qin Yu and said, "There isn't much time left, so I will get straight to the point. Listen well. A long time ago, in the war between humanity and the abyss, humanity paid a tremendous price. Countless powerhouses perished. But in the end, they managed to slay a powerful king that descended from the abyss. But although its mortal body died, its soul still lived on. After research, they discovered that there was an enormous secret hidden within the soul of this abyssal king. Afterwards, the myriad soul Tao was constructed and the heavenly cycle array was laid down. The abyssal king's soul was suppressed here, and the power of the array formation was used to obliterate its soul and extract its source. Thus, this city was created, and the inheritance method of the myriad soul Tao was also created. The teacher's voice paused. But in truth, the original plan wasn't like this. They hoped to find someone to absorb and refine the source left behind by the abyssal king so that they could replace his identity and return to the abyss. After all, for countless years, the world of living beings and the abyss have fought countless tragic wars, and even been on the verge of being destroyed and occupied by the other side. But what is laughable is that we know nothing about the situation within the abyss. Chapter 10:27. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping's eyes widened. They looked at the teacher in front of them, beads of sweat covering their faces and their complexions pale. For the two of them to obtain approval and be allowed to enter the myriad soul Tao, they were naturally outstanding figures of their respective races. Their wisdom and shrewdness were both first class. Although there was no concrete evidence, with Qin Yu's current attitude and the teacher's performance, it wasn't hard to guess his identity. Of course, the most important point was that because their ancestors had participated in the construction of the myriad soul Tao, they already knew that this city had its own will. As they thought about how the teacher had helped Shan Lingyue escape just now, and in addition to the matter of the abyssal strength leaking out, the two of them felt a chill in their hearts. They felt as if they had fallen into an eternal pit of ice, as if all the blood in their bodies would freeze. Their ancestors had actually committed such a great sin. The teacher looked at the two of them. His eyes seemed to see through everything, and they seemed to pierce into the depths of their minds. I'm keeping you two alive because you still have a chance to make amends for the sins of your ancestors. If you die because of this, then that is your fate. Qin Yu took a deep breath. Mister, you mean that I should try a plan that didn't work before, and that is to refine the abyssal king source? The plan was certainly a plan that didn't work. Otherwise, the myriad soul, Tao, wouldn't be in its current state. Although he didn't understand anything about the great calamity of the past, he didn't need to be a genius to imagine just how tragic it was. It was unknown how many peerless powerhouses and stunning proud children of heaven perished in that great war. In the end, the king that descended from the abyss was cut down. To attempt to refine its source and dive into the abyss to see through the situation within was the will of the entire world of living beings. It could be imagined how many people had attempted to refine the abyssal king source. Perhaps all of them were formidable characters that illuminated the world. But they had all failed. The reason for this was unknown, but the degree of difficulty couldn't be described with words. The teacher said, "This is the only way. I will do my best to help you suppress the abyssal king's source. If you succeed and obtain the source, you will be able to perceive all the secrets hidden within its soul. Naturally, you will be able to find a way to unravel the myriad soul Tao. If you fail, I will activate my self-destruction and drag the abyssal king source with me into the endless nothingness, where I will fall into an eternal slumber. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. I asked Mister to teach me. The teacher stood up. There is no need for me to teach you. When the source appears, you will naturally know what to do. Now we just need to wait. He strode out of the rear courtyard and beckoned with his hand. A private school student hurried over and bowed. Mr. Su. His voice was respectful and his eyes were filled with admiration. Tell the dean to dismiss all the private school disciples. The student widened his eyes in shock. Teacher. The teacher didn't explain further. He waved his hand and said go. The dean will understand what I mean. A short moment later, there was no one left in the private school, including the dean. Everyone bowed respectfully and left in a hurry. As he stood in the spacious front courtyard of the private school and gazed at the place where he'd lived for countless years, a trace of a complicated expression appeared in the depths of the teacher's eyes, and then it returned to calm like a quiet spring in the depths of the ground, without the slightest ripple. He didn't turn his head, but he seemed to see Qin Yu, Xia Chun, and Taoist priestess Taiping standing there quietly. He lightly said, The strength of the abyss has been eroding this place since a long, long time ago. At the start, it was suppressed by me, and its progress was incomparably slow. But later, I learned that this was only a deliberate strategy it used to numb me. Unfortunately, by the time I realized this, the situation had already spiraled out of my control. Strictly speaking, this city is already the will of the abyss holds the advantage. But I have the ability to drag it down with me in destruction. So for these past years, it has been patiently nibbling away at it, not daring to make any drastic reactions. I have tried to reverse the situation and seal it away once more. But all my attempts have ended in failure under the test of time. The teacher's eyes became increasingly indifferent. He is one with me, and no plan can be hidden from him. Since he knows that I have decided to take the final step, he certainly won't continue to patiently wait. Moreover, he now has a nearly perfect body, and now the abyss is about to arrive. In a courtyard in the northwestern corner of the city, a roar of suppressed pain came from it. The black heart, wrapped in flesh and blood, beat madly, releasing rolling waves of abyssal demonic energy that caused the flesh and blood to quickly regenerate. Gradually, it turned into a bloody body. Pipa, Pipa, lightning flashed on the surface of this body. Every time a large wound was torn open and blood splashed out. Thunder of Nirvana, thunder of Nirvana. With a roar, the bloody body's eyes widened. Because there was no skin covering it, the eyes were exposed, making them seem particularly horrifying. At this time, they were filled with endless hatred. Qin Yu, this damned human, he had to completely extinguish his soul and tear his corpse to pieces. The final thunder of Nirvana was forced out from his body. Skin rapidly regenerated on the surface of his bloody body. The naked Shang Lingyue lifted a hand and put on a black robe. Even though he looked as if he had recovered completely, his face was deathly pale, without the slightest trace of blood. Although he had managed to escape calamity in the end, he had also suffered terrifying wounds. Even if he returned to the abyss, he would need a massive amount of time to slowly recover. If so, then it would be impossible for him to complete the mission given to him by the clan. This would cause him to face a tremendous problem. But as long as he lived, there were infinite possibilities. Even if he gave up on this mission, he could still obtain the recognition of the clan in other aspects. However, if he wanted to kill Qin Yu, it would be a long, long time in the future. You must live on. Live on and wait for me. His voice came to an abrupt stop. Shang Lingyue's eyes widened. He turned around and stared in the direction of the private school. His face was as pale as paper, without any trace of blood left. Impossible, how is this possible? He whispered to himself. He reached out a trembling hand, and the flesh on his palm suddenly split open. revealing a black crystal. Now, the surface of this crystal flashed with a crimson light. But he hadn't obtained the essence energy that the Lord had prepared for the abyss. So why would this communication talisman be activated? Fear rose in Shang Lingyue's eyes. A look of despair appeared on his face. When the communication talisman was activated, the clan would receive news that he had obtained the essence energy that the Lord had prepared for the clan. But now, if he couldn't bring the essence energy back to the clan, then what awaited him was an incomparably miserable fate. Even with his current status in the clan, it was impossible for him to be pardoned. How could the essence energy be taken away? With the Lord's will sealing it, it is impossible for it to be opened. Shang Lingyue's words were suddenly cut off. In his mind, Qin Yu's figure appeared uncontrollably. It was him, it had to be him. Qin Yu had opened the wooden door and controlled the thunder of nirvanic extermination. He had surpassed his expectations many times already. It wasn't impossible for him to do this again. Die! Shang Lingyue's expression was fierce. He suppressed the violent killing intent that surged in his chest. He was well aware that the most important thing right now wasn't to kill Qin Yu. It was to kill Qin Yu. Moreover, with the current situation, if he really fought with Qin Yu, it was unknown just who would die and who would live. I have a way, I definitely have a way. I can't let things end like this. Shang Lingyue stared at the ground. A look of struggle appeared on his face, but in the end, it turned into endless madness. Doing this might bring him endless troubles in the future, but the situation had already reached this step. So what if things collapsed? Qin Yu, you forced me. You forced me to do this. I will let you taste the most terrifying pain in the world and let you die in despair. Kneeling on the ground, Shang Lingyue began to chant. His deep and suppressed syllables echoed in the courtyard. At this moment, the air gradually became thick and a cold and aura was released. Above his head, the light that shined into the courtyard suddenly dimmed as if it was swallowed up. The nightmare demon race was a rare race in the abyss. They were born nobles and had a powerful and unique bloodline inheritance. In the past, the Abyss King that died in the world of the living was the strongest king of the nightmare demon race. Because of his background, Shang Lingyue, no, perhaps he should be called by his true Abyss name. Song Wu knew a secret related to the nightmare demon king. As someone with the bloodline of the nightmare demon race, after entering the myriad soul Tao, once he encountered an uncontrollable factor. He could borrow the strength of the nightmare demon king in a desperate situation and obtain unbelievable might for a short period of time. This was because the nightmare demon king had never truly died. Even when he was surrounded by the world of the living in the past, it was all part of a plan. But even the elders of his race that informed him of this strictly warned him not to use it unless he had no other choice. This was because this would ruin the great nightmare demon king's plan and even affect the plans of the entire abyss. The world of the living has already sensed the nightmare demon king's plan. Even if I don't expose it, they will know. If that's the case, why don't I take action and completely destroy the city to help the nightmare demon king escape? At that time, this great merit may be able to offset my own great sin. Yes, that's right, this is my last chance. Shang Lingyue looked up. His eyes were now filled with pitch-black pupils that flashed with madness and cruelty. Great nightmare demon king, please hand your strength over to me. Allow me to release your anger and thoroughly burn down the city. Burn away the shackles placed on you by flesh and blood. Burn them to ashes. Bang! Black flames suddenly drilled out from the ground. They touched Song Wu's body and rapidly spread upwards, finally wrapping around his entire body. Ah, strength! This is my king's strength. No matter how strong it is, it will surpass all in this world and become an eternal existence. As Song Wu roared, fear appeared in his eyes. This was Shang Lingyue's consciousness that had been awakened from a deep slumber by the terrifying fluctuations of strength. Lowly servant, to be able to dissipate beneath my king's strength is the greatest honor of your life. Now, Let this city tremble beneath my feet. Song-woo roared out loud. The fear in his eyes rapidly faded away. Or, to be more accurate, it was directly erased by the powerful strength surging within his body. Rumble, rumble. Loud rumbles fell from the skies. Billowing black clouds surged out, weaving together and forming a thick curtain that covered the city, bathing it in darkness. Abyss! Abyss! At this moment, all living beings within the city heard this ruthless and crazed roar. Thus, the abyss truly descended at this moment. Chapter 10:28. The reason why the Abyssal Kings were so powerful was because they had obtained the recognition of the will of the Abyss. Perhaps this was a bit vague, but it could be said that the Abyssal Kings had obtained the might of the Abyss and had become a part of it. By borrowing the strength of the King of Nightmares, Song-woo was equal to the incarnation of the King of Nightmares when he reached his limit. He could use his own strength and summon the descent of the Abyss. The descent here was different from what had occurred in the private school's backyard, where the real world was distorted into the Abyss. A part of the will of the Abyss had directly descended here, turning the entire city into a part of the Abyss. Before the will of the Abyss retreated, this was the Abyss. On the street, behind a steamed bun steamer, the cleanly dressed stall owner's mouth cracked open, revealing pale white gums hidden beneath his flesh. Blood, mixed with saliva, dripped down. Customer, steaming steamed buns. If you don't like it, it's free. How about one? He opened the steamer, revealing a human head inside. Although it was steamed to a pulp, it still hadn't died. Their facial features were twisted and pained howls emitted from their mouths. The cultivator, standing in front of the stall, instantly paled. This was because he discovered that one of the heads in the steamer looked exactly like him. He lifted a hand and knocked the steamer over. Then, the cultivator hurriedly retreated. The stall owner's horrifying face instantly turned fierce. Where do you think you're going? Without you, how am I supposed to steam steamed buns? Go and catch him for me. From the steamer that tumbled to the ground, the steamed head held out. It constantly cried out, "Stay, stay," as it chased after the fleeing cultivator. A fierce face appeared on the thick trunk of the ancient tree. Its mouth was wide open and filled with fangs. It emitted a cruel and bloodthirsty roar. The roots that drilled deep into the earth had already been uprooted. After the abyssal assimilation, they had transformed into tentacles that coiled around each other like a giant millstone. With loud rumbling sounds, they moved the great tree. Thin and numerous branches grew long thorns at the ends. Even though it was shrouded in darkness, one could still clearly feel the cold light it released. They were like incomparably sharp limbs, stabbing at the crowd in a frenzy. A cultivator's body flashed with light, but he didn't expect this demonic ancient tree to be able to predict his dodging trajectory. The moment his figure appeared, a wooden spike pierced through his chest. Ah! He howled in pain. Although his body had been pierced through, the powerful life force of a cultivator prevented him from dying. In the midst of his struggle, a long sword appeared in his hand. A cold light flashed as it heavily chopped down on the wooden spike, producing a loud sound of metal clashing. A gash appeared on the sword, and a large part of the wooden spike had also been cut off. It seemed that one more strike would be able to cut it in half. However, the cultivator no longer had a chance to attack. Wooden thorns whistled toward him from all directions. In the space of a single breath, he was pierced through like a hedgehog. In the next moment, his corpse was dragged and sent into the ferocious mouth of the face that appeared on the trunk of the tree. Amidst the crisp chewing sounds, blood gushed out recklessly. Yunfeng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others were pale. They were hiding in a house with a formation plate floating above their heads. It had already been activated, and the formation was added to the house itself to resist the impact from the outside world. Roar, roar. The oppressive roar assaulted everyone's eardrums. The entire house trembled and creaked in pain. The windows had already been broken. Looking through the phantom array diagram, one could clearly see that the courtyard was now filled with countless fierce ghosts, crazily attacking the array formation's defenses. And they were well aware that these ghost-like people were originally harmless natives of the city not too long ago. When the abyss arrived, they were corroded by the power of the abyss. Or perhaps it could be said that they were lured out by the abyssal strength hidden within their bodies, transforming into abyssal creatures that destroyed all flesh and blood. Come out, you can't escape. I will catch you, tear you to pieces, and then eat you into my stomach bit by bit, turning you into a part of the abyss. Do not struggle any longer. You all know that all of this is meaningless. In the end, all that awaits you is death. Within the room, Yun Feng and the others paled. They had exhausted all of their abilities to escape here and activate this array disk. Although they didn't know what had happened, they had experienced the transformation of the private school's backyard into the abyss, so they were well aware of what was happening in front of them. This entire city had become an abyss. Moreover, what was most terrifying was that the natives of the city had all transformed into horrifying abyssal creatures. There was no place that was safe. This was already their final place of retreat. But no matter how powerful the array disk was, it couldn't withstand the tide of abyssal creatures. Just how long could it last? Once the array disk broke, what awaited them was being torn to pieces. If someone were to fly into the skies and overlook the entire city, they would discover that it had become an amusement park for the devils. The abyssal creatures that had gone berserk began to wildly attack the cultivators that arrived, tearing them to pieces and cleanly eating them. But there was one place that was an exception. The private school in the southern alley of the city was now covered in a faint layer of white light. Although it wasn't strong, it clearly possessed an inconceivable might. It isolated the erosion of the abyss outside, allowing it to maintain its original appearance. The teacher, surnamed Su, stood in the empty front courtyard of the private school. Every pore on his body emitted light. He was the source of this light that covered the entire private school. He looked up at the pitch-black skies and slowly said, "Chinyu, remember, you only have one chance. If you fail, then you will be buried forever with me." With one last glance at the familiar private school in front of him, the teacher closed his eyes. Whoosh, whoosh, the light that covered the entire private school held back. In the next moment, he turned into a mass of radiant light that flashed into Chinyu's chest and fused into his body. Bang! An incomparably powerful aura burst out from his body. At this moment, Chinyu felt as if he were the center of the heavens and earth. No, it was more accurate to say that the heavens and earth had to crawl beneath his will. With a single thought, he could control everything. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping's eyes widened, disbelief on their faces. This method of directly fusing strength surpassed their imaginations. To the two of them, Qin Yu was like a blazing sun. Any tongue of fire that spat out was enough to burn them into nothingness. Could such a formidable strength not be enough to suppress the strength of the abyss? Just how terrifying was the strength of the abyssal king that was killed in the past? In fact, Qin Yu would soon be able to unravel the shock and doubts in his heart. The strength of the Nightmare King was borrowed by Tsang Wu to temporarily incarnate into the abyssal king and summon a part of the abyssal world to descend. Thus, the strength of the abyss was barely separated from the city. This was why it could fuse into Qin Yu's body and temporarily be used by him. But fundamentally speaking, the two sides were still in an inseparable state of fusion. Whoever obtained the final victory would be able to swallow the other. Of course, this was only under normal circumstances. It was clear that this city had the strength to destroy itself and drag the abyss into a deep slumber. Correspondingly, even if Qin Yu won in the end, he didn't believe he could easily swallow the source of the abyssal king. However, it was clearly too early to consider these things. This was because only the victor would worry about how to digest the opponent's strength. Qin Yu took a deep breath and looked into the distance. He could feel that powerful, cold, and endlessly cruel, destructive fluctuation. Was this the strength of the Abyssal King? Although he had already guessed this, it was only now that he truly felt it that he understood just how terrifying it was. This was an existence that, even with Qin Yu's current state, he still felt a deep sense of dread in his heart. In fact, he even faintly felt as if he were being suppressed. Bang! A loud explosion rang out in the distance. Even though it was far away, it still penetrated through the eardrums and reached deep into the soul. Rumble, rumble. In the skies, thick black clouds wove together. They violently tumbled about, and an incomparably terrifying aura swept out in all directions. Within the entire city, countless beings that had completed their abyssal transformation shivered and fell to the ground. Their bodies shivered as they tried to stick close to the ground, expressing their awe and submission to the Supreme King. Roars like thunderclaps. Billowing waves of sound surged through the skies above the city. The abyssal creatures that prostrated themselves on the ground fiercely looked up. Their originally cold and bloodthirsty eyes became even crazier, because at this moment they received the will of their king: tear apart all life and destroy everything in front of them. This city that had imprisoned the strength of the abyss for countless years would be thoroughly destroyed today. The abyssal creatures that had been instinctively restraining their desires suddenly went completely berserk. Based on their instincts and their keen sense of smell towards flesh and blood, they crazily surrounded the cultivators in the city. A cultivator that was submerged in the sea of abyssal creatures revealed a look of despair. With a loud cry, the aura within his body instantly went berserk. In the next moment, with an earth-shattering explosion, his entire body completely exploded, shattering into countless fragments of his body. The terrifying power produced by the explosion tore apart the nearby abyssal life forms, destroying them along with him. But in the blink of an eye, the empty space created by the explosion was filled up with abyssal creatures once more. They crazily devoured flesh and blood. Whether it was the flesh and blood creatures that blew themselves up or their fellow clansmen that were torn apart, they were all chewed and swallowed. And this wasn't an isolated case. Within the entire city, as the abyssal creatures went berserk, nearly half of the cultivators had died in just a dozen breaths of time. As for the rest, such as Yun Feng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others, they didn't have enough and could only bitterly hold on. If there wasn't a turning point with the current situation, they would soon all die one by one. P'Sang Wu stepped through the void, his entire body burning with black flames. A sharp horn grew out of his head and fine and exquisite lines appeared on the surface of his body. These lines covered every inch of his body, and he exuded a boundless majesty. His indifferent eyes were like those of a being that sat in the highest heavens, coldly looking down at the city that had now turned into hell. The essence energy that the king had prepared for his race had already been taken away. He wanted to take as little as possible to lessen the guilt he had to bear, so he naturally had to condense another portion of human essence energy. And in the city, these human cultivators that had entered with hope and ambition, as well as outstanding talent and strength, were naturally the best materials to condense essence energy. Of course, if he wanted to obtain the forgiveness of the abyss, a complete portion of human essence energy could only be considered a supplementary reward. A king that had escaped and returned to the abyss was the foundation of everything. Now, P'Sang Wu was going to destroy the will of this city and completely swallow up all of his strength. This was the place he had arrived. In the skies above the private school, P'Sang Wu's indifferent and icy cold eyes revealed a trace of fluctuation. He looked at Qin Yu on the ground and could feel the sun-like, terrifying aura that was released from his body. An icy cold killing intent tumbled in his chest, crazily rising at this time. It's him. It really is him. This lowly human cultivator was no different from a bug. He must have been a pawn sent into the abyss by the world of the living. As I thought, my guess wasn't wrong. Humanity has already sensed the changes that occurred in the myriad soul Tao. So, everything I did was correct. Qi knew all of the accidents and changes were caused by him. Die. With a deep roar, Songwu lifted a hand and pressed down. Then he would use Qin Yu's death and destruction to draw a perfect end to all of this. Chapter 10:29. Qin Yu discovered something very interesting. Now, the strength of the Abyssal King that descended through Shang Lingyue's mortal body was weaker than he expected. This wasn't too accurate. It should be that the strength that erupted from this abyssal creature wasn't as formidable as he had sensed. Qin Yu wasn't sure. Was it because the abyssal strength naturally suppressed flesh and blood beings, causing his senses to deviate? Or was it because this abyssal creature that descended through Shang Lingyue's mortal body wasn't able to completely release the might of an abyssal king? But this wasn't important. What was important was that Qin Yu saw hope he could kill this opponent and suppress the source of the abyssal king. He might even be able to refine and absorb it, although it was still weak. As long as there was a chance and he fought for it with everything he had, there was always a chance of success. So, this was a very interesting matter. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion erupted, and a berserk and terrifying power twisted the space around them like two giant pythons. Massive tracts of abyssal energy exploded outwards, sweeping out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, a massive ring of emptiness was formed. The ground shattered and buildings collapsed. Some abyssal creatures that were attracted by the Abyssal King's aura were directly torn to pieces. Countless pieces of flesh and blood flew into the air, filling the air with the smell of blood. Qin Yu drew back again and again. Every step he took caused the ground to tremble and leave behind deep footprints. When he stopped at the last step, he couldn't help but frown. His feet that had sunk into the ground were now covered with blood-red tentacles. They were like the dense roots of a plant. They rapidly spread upwards. An extremely colding aura was released. It was like a hair-thin needle that pierced into his flesh and blood, drilling deep into his marrow. In the blink of an eye, these blood-red tentacles had already wrapped around Qin Yu's legs, covering everything below his waist. Song Wu's eyes shook for a moment before he quickly composed himself. He laughed. The strength of this city struggling at death's door is indeed stronger than I imagined. But this is the abyss, a world that belongs to me. Moreover, your cultivation is far too weak. Even if you obtain strength fusion, how much of it can you display? He lifted a hand and grasped forwards, his fingers clenching. Now let me destroy you, destroy this city. Bang! A dazzling light erupted from Qin Yu's body. The blood-red tentacles wrapped around him emitted pain screams and began to burn, turning to ashes in the blink of an eye. Bang! A deep thumping sound echoed out from the surrounding void. The dazzling light that covered Qin Yu suddenly caved in many places. Looking carefully, it formed a palm print. Sizzle! An ear-piercing corrosive sound came from the sunken area of light. Two diametrically opposed forces crazily collided in this small area. More and more abyss devil chi was exploding, forming wave after wave of terrifying waves that spread to an even larger area. The abyssal private school was completely destroyed in a few breaths of time, and a terrifying aura covered the entire city. The remaining cultivators who had been besieged by the abyssal creatures and were struggling to survive were overjoyed when they sensed this fluctuation. Ah, this power! Someone was fighting against this terrifying creature. Could it be that the outside world has already discovered the change in the myriad soul Tao? Great! If we persevere, we might not die today. I am a direct bloodline descendant of the Zhang family. I wonder which great lord has arrived. Please hurry and save me. The Zhang family will surely repay you. A cultivator cried out in ecstasy, but there were also some people who were able to guess the truth of the matter. Yunfeng, Jiang Yuanyi, and the others glanced at each other. Although no one spoke, they could guess what the others were thinking. The one who had acted today was that mysterious Lord Qin Yu. Perhaps the outside world really could sense the changes occurring in the myriad soul Tao, but it was impossible for them to respond in such a short period of time and send powerhouses to help. The only possibility was that it was that mysterious Qinyu that no one had ever seen through or understood. It was just that this degree of strength impact, even if it was only the aftermath, left their minds shaking and filled with despair. If they were directly struck by it, they would instantly vanish. Lord Qinyu was far more terrifying than they had imagined. If Qinyu wins, we might have a chance to live. Otherwise, we will surely die here. Yunfeng's eyes were cloudy and uncertain for a long time. Then she took a deep breath and shouted, "We will activate the strength of the array formation and actively kill the abyssal creatures outside." Jiang Yuan's eyes widened. "Are you crazy?" Yunfeng said, "I'm not crazy. Can you not sense that the ones fighting with Lord Qinyu right now are the same race as those abyssal creatures outside? Their strength comes from this terrifying demonic energy. The more we kill, the more demonic energy we can consume. Perhaps we might be able to help Lord Qinyu. Although the effect might be limited, even if we can only help a little, we must still help. Otherwise, once Lord Qinyu is defeated, even if the array formation still has some remaining strength, we will only be able to live for a little longer." "That's right. Yunfeng is right. We cannot just wait for death. Let's activate the strength of the array formation. Rather than waiting for death, we might as well kill as much as we can. Even if we can't escape today's calamity, it won't be a loss." After several breaths of time, the house that was being crazily attacked by the abyssal creatures suddenly erupted with a brilliant light. The power of the array formation condensed into sword shadows that wildly cut down in all directions. In an instant, dozens of abyssal creatures were cut to pieces. But these abyssal creatures were covered in abyssal demonic energy and possessed an incomparably potent vitality. Even though their bodies were torn to pieces, they still hadn't died. Part of the broken body was torn apart and devoured by other abyssal creatures, while the rest of the body was pieced together into a ball. Flesh sprouted from each other and grew together crazily, turning into a monster with 7 or 8 heads and dozens of legs and arms. "Damn it, you bunch of bastards. You actually ate my body. My arm, spit out my arm. And my thigh." The 12+ heads angrily roared. But at this time, the black curtain that covered the city began to wildly shake. An incomparably massive face suddenly caved in. It opened its eyes to reveal a pair of icy cold and cruel blood-red pupils that overlooked the entire city. Roar! The monster that had been formed from the broken limbs and dismembered body began to cry out in fear and alarm, as if it had sensed something horrifying. In the next moment, its massive body exploded. Its flesh and blood instantly withered and turned into powder that fell to the ground. Thick abyssal demonic energy condensed from its body and held out. At almost the same time, the surrounding abyssal creatures began to self-destruct. Their mortal bodies were directly destroyed, and their abyssal demonic energy was stripped away. In the blink of an eye, the aggressive abyssal creatures had been annihilated and the outside world quieted down. Yunfeng and the others that were activating the array formation with all their strength were stunned for a moment before joy appeared on their faces. But soon this joy vanished. They turned towards the direction of the private school and felt an aura that left them in despair. Fear rose in their eyes. It wasn't that Lord Qinyu had won, but that the abyssal creature he had fought had plundered all the abyssal demonic energy in the city. Although this meant that Qinyu hadn't fallen into a disadvantage in his battle with this terrifying abyssal creature, the abyssal creature that had plundered all the demonic energy in the city would inevitably become even more terrifying. "What do we do?" Jiang Yuan's voice trembled. Yunfeng paled. "We can only wait." The abyssal demonic energy that came from the direction of the private school had already formed a terrifying vortex. Once they approached, with their strength they would instantly be torn to pieces. They wouldn't be able to help at all. Their fate now completely rested on Qinyu's shoulders. Rumble, rumble. The vortex formed by abyssal demonic energy wildly spun in the skies, emitting heaven-shaking rumbling sounds. The flames on Tsang Wu's body blazed even hotter. "Qin Yu, do you think you can win? Now be destroyed!" Bang! From the center of the vortex, a terrifying pillar of demonic energy held out, falling onto Qin Yu's head. It was like a towering mountain pressing down on Qin Yu. The radiant light that wrapped around Qin Yu began to constantly crack apart, emitting loud cracking sounds as if something was breaking apart. His complexion changed. Beneath this pillar of demonic energy, he was completely suppressed, unable to move at all. And the strength he obtained from the city could only barely guarantee that he wouldn't be destroyed by the pillar of demonic energy. Tsang Wu took a step forward and landed on the ground. His eyes were cruel and ferocious, but they also revealed boundless excitement and fervor. "Now you can't escape. I'm going to eat you up bit by bit and imprison your soul for eternity." Only like this could he dispel the hatred in Tsang Wu's heart. He opened his mouth and fiercely sucked in at Qin Yu. Immediately, motes of light flew out from Qin Yu's body and into his mouth. The abyssal nightmare race had a special method of plundering. They could directly deprive an enemy of their strength. This strength didn't just refer to their cultivation, but also their flesh and blood and soul. As the motes of light fell into his mouth, Tsang Wu's eyes widened, filled with shock and disbelief. In fact, as his mind shook, he even temporarily stopped plundering and swallowing Qin Yu. This strength with your cultivation, how could you possess it? No, it's not your own strength. It's some sort of extremely heaven-defying good fortune that's hidden inside your body. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. This is an unexpected harvest, a great harvest. I originally thought that even if I successfully rescued my king, my cultivation would suffer a setback. I never imagined there would be such a pleasant surprise in front of me. As long as I swallow you, I will definitely be able to break through my current boundary. I might even go a step further and reach the level of a near king. At that time, the entire abyss will recognize me, and there is an extremely high chance I will become the new king of the nightmare race. Tsang Wu's heart began to fiercely beat, revealing an increasingly greedy heat. In any abyssal race, a race was only allowed to have a single king. Only when the previous king perished could a new king be born. If the king truly resurrected and returned to the abyss, then the first one he would kill would be Tsang Wu, who could threaten his position. So, if he wanted to become king, he would have to make the current king completely disappear. As this thought appeared, Tsang Wu's entire mind shivered. The suppression and submission in his bloodline left him feeling uneasy and fearful. But soon, this fear was completely burned away by the raging flames of ambition. Because this was his once-in-a-lifetime chance to swallow Qin Yu, seize the good fortune within his body, and obtain the recognition of the abyss. Then he could seize the king's strength and have him and this city thoroughly disappear. And he, Tsang Wu, would replace Qin Yu and become the new king of the nightmare race. He would step into the highest level of the abyss and possess the ability to control the will of the abyss. From there, he would realize his life's greatest dream. He would lead the abyssal races to occupy the world of the living and turn all flesh and blood living beings into lambs to be slaughtered under the rule of the abyss. That's right. I am doing this not just for myself, but to accomplish the great goal of the abyss that has ruled over the world of the living for countless years. So, everything I am doing is right. My king, please hand over your strength to me. I will definitely fulfill your wish. After affirming his heart, Tsang Wu's eyes became even more blazing hot. He stubbornly stared at Qin Yu. This was because everything he considered had to be built on the foundation of swallowing Qin Yu. And now, it seemed that this was only a matter of time. Chapter 1030. That would be very boring. In particular, Qin Yu discovered that he didn't have the slightest ability to resist Tsang Wu's swallowing and plundering. He was a fish on the chopping block. He wasn't placed on the chopping block, but had been ruthlessly chopped in. This feeling of helplessness and despair wasn't a good feeling. But despair was despair. He absolutely wouldn't give up. As long as he wasn't dead, he couldn't give up. A turning point might come in the next moment. He crazily stimulated the strength of the city that fused into his body to reduce the speed at which it was being plundered. But at the same time, Qin Yu's heart began to turn cold. He could control the strength of the city, but it wasn't completely under his control. This was because in Qin Yu's perception, while the strength of the city couldn't break through the suppression of the abyssal demonic energy, it should at least be able to ensure that he wasn't harmed. It shouldn't be like right now where he could only fall into despair and wait for death to arrive. Under the cover of the sun and moon force field, Qin Yu had great confidence in his own perception abilities. He knew this wasn't an illusion. In other words, the strength of the city that fused into his body was holding back. But what Qin Yu couldn't understand was why it was doing this. If Qin Yu was swallowed by Tsangwu, then the strength of the city that fused into his body would return to the abyss and vanish into thin air. There was a problem. There must be some secret that Qin Yu didn't know about. His thoughts raced. In the blink of an eye, a thought flashed through his mind. The abyssal king strength that this abyssal creature controlled wasn't complete to begin with. This was the same situation he faced. Was it just a coincidence? Or perhaps this was the key. In today's situation, when he was on the verge of death, Qin Yu certainly wouldn't believe that this was just a coincidence. If this really was the key, a chill gushed out from the depths of his heart. Qin Yu stiffened, as if he had fallen into an icy lake. He suddenly thought of an incomparably terrifying possibility. If this was really the case, then he feared he wouldn't be able to escape death today. Ha 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 ha. Qin Yu, you will vanish into thin air and become a part of my body. Now, hand over all of your strength to me. Tsang-Wu excitedly roared, a blazing heat surging in the depths of his eyes. He opened his mouth and sucked in a deep breath. The motes of light that flew out from Qin Yu's body suddenly rose. But at this time a change occurred. Tsang-Wu's mouth was still wide open, but the swallowing strength that erupted from it had vanished. Excitement, agitation, greed, and other emotions froze on his face. His eyes were filled with panic. At this moment, he lost control of the power in his body. An ancient and cruel consciousness gradually awakened. We seem to have an unexpected harvest. A low, slow voice resounded in the void. Layers of fluctuations appeared, and a black ball of light appeared. Vaguely, one could see a blurry face inside the ball of light. It was like a god soaring above the 9 heavens, cold and indifferent. Now his eyes were tightly locked onto Qin Yu. Deep in his indifferent eyes, there was a burning heat that couldn't be concealed. You're too impatient. We should wait a little longer. Amidst the spatial fluctuations, a white ball of light appeared, followed by a calm voice. This voice, Qin Yu's heart shrank. He stared at the white sphere of light. A face appeared from within. It opened its eyes and looked at Qin Yu. It lightly said, "You are smarter than I imagined." Qin Yu's lips moved, but he discovered that he couldn't make a single sound. The strength of the city that had fused into his body had turned into a terrifying imprisonment that thoroughly suppressed him. Indeed, what he guessed was the truth. This city and the abyssal king suppressed beneath it had already reached some sort of agreement. A cold laugh echoed out from the black ball of light. Agreement? Of course not, because I am him and he is me. Qin Yu's eyes widened. The white ball of light suddenly expanded, turning into a phantom. It was the teacher who had already disappeared. His expression was calm. Before, I once told you that after the abyssal king was killed, the world of living beings' initial plan was to refine and absorb its source energy to replace its identity and enter the abyss. In this way, they could know themselves and their enemies and explore the abyss. In truth, not everyone failed. For instance, I should be considered half successful. The black ball of light flashed and turned into another teacher. The two were completely identical, except that their expressions were icy cold and their black robes were as black as ink. He became me, and I became him. But what a pity we were unable to complete our fusion, because we lacked an important medium. In order to avoid being discovered by others, we constructed the myriad soul path to conceal the secret and wait for that medium to appear. The teacher pointed at Sangwoo. He is a nightmare with a pure abyssal bloodline. Because of certain reasons, we could not continue to wait, so we chose him to become the medium. Of course, he is only the most important part of the medium, and you are also a part of it. The black-robed teacher licked his lips. But surprises always come too suddenly. Originally, the medium that the two of you formed wasn't perfect. Even if you managed to help us complete our fusion, it would have left behind considerable drawbacks. But now, a strength that leaves even us startled has appeared on your body. The teacher said, "We do not know what sort of existence the strength you possess is, but as long as we can seize it, we can truly become one." Hee. The black-robed teacher's lips curled up in a smile. "I've said so much because I hope that you can die with understanding. Moreover, to become a part of our long and grand plan is your greatest honor. Secondly, it's because we need time to adjust the plan and determine your role. Now, everything has been perfected." The teacher nodded. He looked at Chinyu. "You will become the new medium's main body. You will strip away everything from this nightmare's bloodline and forge a body that is completely suitable for fusing with us. Let's begin. I've waited far, far too long. I can't wait any longer. Then let's begin." Within Qin Yu's body, the city strength suppressing him suddenly revealed a fierce expression. It was like a python that had awoken from its slumber and opened its bloody jaws. "Ah!" Sangwoo cried out in pain. Billowing abyssal demon energy gushed out from his body, forming a raging river that wildly poured into Qin Yu's body. Abyssal demon energy was the nemesis of flesh and blood to begin with. Once it came into contact with it, it would produce a terrifying, corrosive effect. On the surface of Qin Yu's body, all of his exposed flesh and blood turned pitch black in the blink of an eye. Then, the surface rapidly decayed, turning into pitch black mucus that dripped to the ground. But at this time, the city strength that had fused into his body and formed a formidable cage began to fuse into him on its own initiative. It was like a simple and effective neutralizer. It perfectly offset and annihilated the damage that the abyssal demon energy brought to his flesh and blood. In the end, all that was left over was a black gold strength that flowed through Qin Yu's body, fusing into him little by little. But this process wasn't as beautiful as it seemed. Although the city's strength counteracted the corrosion of the abyssal demon energy, it still increased by 10 times or even 100 times. Qin Yu was currently withstanding a great deal of pain. It felt as if an abyssal creature was being forcefully stuffed into his body. Every inch of his flesh and blood would be split open from the middle. Roaring was an effective way to vent one's pain. Although it couldn't truly reduce the excruciating pain one had to bear, it could still make one feel a little more relaxed on a psychological level. Unfortunately, Qin Yu couldn't even make the slightest expression right now, much less make a single sound. He could only allow the trembling flesh and blood on his face to portray an indifferent and terrifying image of himself. The teacher looked at Qin Yu. "Your ability to withstand pain is also stronger than I imagined. In normal circumstances, your consciousness should have collapsed by now. Perhaps you really should give up. At the very least, you can make yourself suffer less pain." The black-robed teacher smiled. "This is humanity. You always harbor some lowly and worthless thoughts. You believe that man can conquer the heavens, but man is man. So how can you resist the heavens? Today, you are destined to offer your everything to us." Thump! Thump! The 2 hearts in Qin Yu's chest wildly beat, as if they would explode in the next moment. Black blood vessels appeared in his chest, weaving together and stabbing into the 2 hearts. The violent heartbeat couldn't be covered up. Gulp, gulp, gulp. After plundering the strength of the two hearts, the black blood vessels began to grow at an even more astonishing speed. Soon a new heart was born. Its entire body was pitch black, but its surface shimmered with a faint metallic luster. After an unknown period of time, it finally began to beat. Thump! A third heartbeat sounded out from Qin Yu's chest. His pupils suddenly turned even darker. It was like they had been dyed with ink, like they had been thrown into the endless darkness of night. After being dyed for tens of millions of years, there was no longer any impurities left. Across from Qin Yu, Tsang Wu emitted a howl of despair. Then his entire body shattered and he vanished from sight. All of the abyssal demon energy, all of it, had fused into Qin Yu's body. The black-clothed teacher's eyes widened, a look of infatuation in his eyes. Perfect, it is even more perfect than I imagined. By fusing with the strength of the abyss and maintaining the body of a flesh and blood life form, we will become gods that wander between two worlds, finally reaching a transcendent realm. Let's begin the fusion. The teacher remained calm. Shua! Shua! The two of them stepped forwards at the same time. Their figures turned into black and white spheres of light that drilled into Qin Yu's body. Bang! Blazing flames burst out from his body. What was strange was that these flames used the space between Qin Yu's eyebrows as a boundary. The left half was pure white and the right half was pitch black. But this situation didn't continue for too long. The space between Qin Yu's eyebrows was the boundary between the two opposing flames. Then, with Qin Yu's body as the foundation, it formed a spinning vortex of flames. However, the black and white colors were still distinct, as if there was an invisible boundary between them that completely separated the two. Qin Yu opened his eyes. His left eye was pure white, and his right eye was as black as an abyss, both icy cold. You are me, so why don't you fuse? I also want to ask you this question. A question, and an answer came from Qin Yu's mouth. Strangely, the air around him seemed to condense into essence. An invisible pressure flooded every inch of space. It was like a towering mountain had arrived, suppressing all directions. Bang! Without any warning, the perfectly spinning black and white flames suddenly shook. Two fire dragons drilled out, one black and one white, crazily slaughtering each other, tearing at each other with all their might. You are me, and I am you. But in truth, I am me, and you are you. Even if their essence was the same, they had different consciousnesses. Neither of them was willing to dissipate. Thus, who would be the true leader in the end? Only a battle would be decided. Far away, drifting in the nothingness of space, there was a world that gradually condensed, shining with the only light. At the center of this world, within a towering temple, a figure let out a long breath. He muttered, I knew that boy Qin Yu's luck would be so good. He wouldn't be killed off like this. The turning point has finally appeared. But in truth, he had already prepared for the worst-case scenario. Once Qin Yu was killed, he would sever their connection. With this basically completed world, he would have a certain foundation. Perhaps he would fall into a long period of weakness, but he wouldn't fall into a deep slumber. Of course, this was only the worst-case scenario. As long as there was even the slightest possibility, he hoped that Qin Yu could continue living. It wasn't just because of their close relationship. There was also an extremely important objective factor. From Qin Yu, he could see the possibility of stepping into the highest heights. Although it was weak, it was still commendable. In this world, there are countless so-called breathtaking geniuses. But if one disregarded their background, there weren't many that could compare with Qin Yu at the same boundary. With a deep breath, the phantom of a great sun suddenly descended. In the skies of this world, the sun that illuminated all things seemed to echo in response. The light it released suddenly brightened. Since the turning point had appeared, he certainly wouldn't allow himself to make any mistakes. Moreover, if he could succeed, then this hopeless situation would turn into another harvest for Chinyu. Even the little blue lamp didn't know just what this harvest meant to Chinyu. The black and white fire dragons crazily slaughtered each other, trying to swallow each other up. But the premise of all of this was that only one of them could become the final victor. For the sandpiper and clam to fight, and the fisherman to profit. This was something that neither side could accept. Thus, as the two fire dragons fought, their first choice was to thoroughly destroy Chinyu's consciousness. And the destruction of his consciousness meant that his soul would wither and be destroyed. All that would be left over would be an empty shell that would serve as a medium to carry them. The shaking black and white flames were like monstrous waves, crazily sweeping through every inch of Chinyu's body. Any one of these levels of strength was enough to instantly destroy Chinyu's consciousness, much less in this situation where the waves continued endlessly. Thus, after sensing that Chinyu's soul aura had disappeared, the black and white dragons never imagined that he would still be able to survive. This was Chinyu's only chance of survival, and also the variable that the little blue lamp spoke of. This was because he possessed the sun and moon force field, allowing him to transcend the world. And within his soul space, there was something that seemed ordinary but actually had a great background. The cosmic Seacross bell. Ever since the purple moon and blue sun met and formed the sun and moon force field, the main will of the bell, the self-proclaimed beautiful little girl, had fallen into a deep slumber. Of course, the term slumber wasn't strictly speaking accurate, because during this process, its strength had constantly increased. Perhaps it could be called a revival. In short, the current cosmic Seacross bell hadn't changed much from its previous appearance, but its might was on a completely different level. Chinyu's soul was currently hidden within. The sun and moon force field had shrunk into a ball, sticking close to the cosmic Seacross bell as it shrunk to its strongest defense. If it were only like this, then the sun and moon force field would still be discovered. This was because whether it was the abyssal king that suppressed the true city or the one who built the myriad soul path in the past, they were once the most terrifying and formidable existences in the world. But Chinyu didn't only have these cards in his hand. The aura of the jade egg was the key to his ultimate ability to conceal himself. It wrapped around the cosmic Seacross bell, its body seeming like nothingness, forming a circle of absolute concealment. Unless black and white finally completed their fusion and occupied Chinyu's mortal body, it would be impossible to discover Chinyu's soul that still existed. In all dangers in the world, a turning point might exist, but whether or not one could grasp it depended on whether or not one's own accumulations were deep enough. Of course, what Chinyu needed to thank the most was the white and black that were fighting each other, neither willing to dissipate. If they were truly of noble character and unquestionable integrity, or if they kept their original promise and directly completed their fusion, then Chinyu would have nowhere to hide and his only fate would be destruction. Even if he had the little blue lamp and many other cards in his hand, this was still an unchangeable fate. As black and white desperately fought, Chinyu's soul escaped into the cosmic Seacross bell. He was waiting for his only chance to attack. Chapter 1031. The reason he had to wait for a chance was because even if black and white were both wounded, their residual strength would still be enough to easily erase Chinyu. Thus, he only had one chance to attack. There was no need to say if he succeeded. Otherwise, Chinyu's soul would truly scatter. Hiding within the cosmic Seacross bell, Chinyu could feel a sense of urgency as he stood at the turning point of fate. Taking a single wrong step would put him in a hopeless situation. But he never imagined that he wouldn't be able to wait for the most appropriate chance to attack before he would be forced to participate in this life-seizing battle. That's right, this was a life-seizing battle. Black and white would struggle with each other in order to preserve themselves and become the main will. As for Chinyu, he would struggle with both sides so that he could survive. Within his chest, 3 hearts wildly beat. One was pitch black and shined with a metallic halo. One was crimson and beat with a fierce and overbearing aura. This represented the heart of the ancient, and the last was the true heart condensed from Qin Yu's own bloodline, the heart that originally belonged to him. The variable appeared in this heart that originally belonged to Qin Yu. His body had already been stripped away, and there was only a tiny bit of his bloodline left over. As black and white fought, this heart suddenly erupted with all its strength. Thump! Thump! The heart began to beat faster. The bloodline strength, hidden deep within his marrow, was activated with it. Tiny golden runes appeared, instantly covering the entire heart. Moreover, they began to extend along his bloodline at an astonishing speed. It wanted to take back control of his body. This wasn't Qin Yu's will, but a powerful bloodline instinct that was protecting its own status. The black and white fire dragons that covered Qin Yu, crazily devouring each other, suddenly had a flash of surprise in their eyes. They could sense that this bloodline strength wasn't too formidable, but it unexpectedly gave them a threatening feeling. But this wasn't true. The black and white fire dragons were startled. Instead, a blazing heat flashed in their eyes. In essence, they were one. Neither side had full confidence they could defeat the other and swallow it, becoming the only existence left. Thus, in this seemingly intense battle, the final outcome could only depend on their own luck. But luck was the most difficult thing to grasp. No one wanted to entrust their life or death to such an illusory existence. As long as there was a chance to increase their chances of victory, the black and white dragons wouldn't let it go. And now, this assistance had appeared. All that mattered now was who could seize it. Bang! The black dragon swung its tail fiercely and sent the white dragon flying. However, the white dragon also paid the price of having a large wound torn open on its body. The black dragon didn't continue fighting. It turned and, in a flash, drilled into Qin Yu's body, vanishing from sight. The white dragon let out a low roar and followed closely behind, entering the flesh as well. The black fire dragon drilled into the black metallic luster condensed from the power of the abyss, the third heart that could be called the heart of the abyss. In the next moment, a berserk abyssal power erupted. The heart of the abyss madly throbbed as countless runes condensed from demonic energy held out. Every rune was like a miniature abyssal creature, one that crazily chased after Qin Yu and swallowed his bloodline, condensing into a golden rune. Every time it devoured one, the heart of the abyss's control over its body would grow a little stronger. Even though the increase was so small that it was negligible in the current situation, any advantage could become the key to victory. The heart of the abyss had already attacked, so the other one certainly wouldn't sit still and wait for death. The white dragon broke into the ancient's heart, and countless white runes erupted with it. What was different from the abyssal runes was that the white runes didn't choose to swallow Qin Yu's bloodline runes. Rather, after touching them, they fused together. But whether it was swallowing or fusing, the result was the same for Qin Yu. The black and white dragons were seizing his bloodline to increase their chances of victory. A trace of horror instinctively rose up from his soul. Without any reason, Qin Yu naturally knew that he couldn't sit back and watch as his bloodline was completely stolen away. Otherwise, the backlash from severing his bloodline would be enough to cause his soul to fall into a state of absolute weakness. At that time, even if he waited for the perfect opportunity to attack, he would lose all ability to fight. He had to attack ahead of time. Qin Yu took a deep breath. Before he could speak, the space within the cosmic Seacross bell suddenly collapsed inwards, and the phantom of a great sun appeared in the pitch-black darkness. The little blue lamp's thoughts fluctuated. Qin Yu, you originally had a better chance, but in this world, there is nothing that completely follows your own will. What should I do? As expected, the little blue lamp wouldn't sit back and watch him die like this. Although this fellow had been hiding for some unknown reason, it still wouldn't drop the ball in a critical moment. I will attack, and the strength hidden within your body will erupt. None of this needs your guidance. because when you face the abyss, they will instinctively resist. But remember, whether or not you can survive in the end will depend on yourself. The little blue lamp was silent for a moment. Then it continued to say, "Do your best and don't let yourself die. If you really cannot escape this calamity, I guarantee that in the future I will take revenge for you." Qin Yu was expressionless. "I won't die." He still had too many wishes, too many unwillingness. How could he die like this? No matter who it was, whether it was the king of the abyss or the supreme elder who created the myriad soul Tao in the past. So what? If he didn't want to die, then none of them could kill him. This wasn't some brainless arrogance or pride, but an obsession that strengthened his heart. If he didn't even have an obsession to live on, then how could he survive in such a dangerous and hopeless situation? Dong, 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 within his chest, 3 hearts wildly beat. The heart of the abyss that had fused with the black fire dragon began to dance with black flames. This was the burning of abyssal demonic energy, releasing swallowing black runes that wildly swallowed up the strength of his bloodline. After fusing with the ancient's heart of the white fire dragon, the white runes rapidly fused together. The golden bloodline runes turned pure white in the blink of an eye. Qin Yu's own heart continued to beat quickly, but it gradually became weaker and weaker. It contracted and expanded, becoming sluggish. This was because the strength of his bloodline was rapidly fading away. It was on the verge of drying up. Ding-ling-ling. The ringing of a bell suddenly resounded, and it was clear and oppressive. When it entered the ears, it was like a few large stones had been stuffed into one's chest, and it was filled with a burning sensation that caused every single breath to become extremely difficult. The soul didn't need to gasp for breath, but what this bell sound targeted was precisely the soul. This was because it came from the cosmic Sea-Cross bell, a treasure that originated from a mysterious land. Its background was far more formidable than what Qin Yu knew, and it was a supreme soul treasure. If the wills of the black and white fire dragons existed within their bodies, then even the strength of the cosmic Sea-Cross bell wouldn't be able to easily shake them. But now they had abandoned their ruined bodies and entered Qin Yu's body, only retaining the purest strength of their soul. This allowed the cosmic Sea-Cross bell's strength to be displayed to its greatest degree. As the bell's sound entered his ears, the beating of the heart of the abyss and the ancient's heart paused for a brief moment. Then the black and white fire dragons emitted deep and pained roars. With their strength, the moment the cosmic Sea-Cross bell attacked, it had already sensed the aura of Qin Yu's soul. In their eyes, the soul of a weak human cultivator was like a candle that could be casually extinguished. Yet it had remained hidden until now and had even inflicted a certain degree of damage upon them. Although it wasn't serious, the black and white fire dragons felt as if their dignity had been challenged. Of course, what was even more important was that they actually felt a threat from Qin Yu's soul aura. One couldn't help but acknowledge that these old antiques that had lived for endless years had a powerful and keen intuition. Moreover, they firmly believed in their own judgment. This was because over the countless years, they had verified the accuracy of their intuition many times. Thus, the moment they sensed Qin Yu's soul aura, the black and white fire dragons made the same decision. They would stop fighting and erase this boy's soul first.